Chapter 1030, Zaar Caiyun floating above the city of God. Jian Chen glanced past the slightly familiar city. He could not help but think back to all the things that had happened when he was last here, revealing a sliver of reminiscence. 8 clans of the city of God, the Zaar family, Jian Chen, have returned. Back then, you sent all those experts to attack me, almost claiming my life. Today, I will look down on your city, Jian Chen said with a deep voice. His eyes became icy as he spoke, and a tremendous presence began to radiate from him. It enveloped the entire city, and within it was his undisguised battle intent. Many years ago, Jian Chen still needed to move around the city of God cautiously despite his extraordinary strength. There were many experts he could not afford to offend, but today, he could move brazenly about the city, publicly challenging the authority of a capital of the continent. Jian Chen's presence alarmed all the people in the city. Everyone could feel it clearly, regardless of their strength, and those weaker felt like a huge boulder pressed down on their chests. They struggled to even breathe. What a great presence. Who is the owner of this presence? Are they challenging the city? Various voices rang out around the city, while the empty streets became filled with people very quickly. In a moment, everyone surged out of their houses, and some people even looked at the sky as they stood on their roofs. All the ancestors of the 8 clans opened their eyes at the same time and stared outside in shock from their places of seclusion. Without the slightest hesitation, they stopped their cultivation and rose up, heading over with their greatest speed. The president of the Radiant Saint Master Union sat on his bed in a luxurious room at the highest, most central part of the castle-like union. Suddenly, he snapped his eyes open when the great presence surged in from outside. He immediately glanced in the direction of the presence through the window and furrowed his eyebrows. He mumbled with a deep voice, "What powerful presence. The owner must be at least a saint king, and there's a great battle intent sandwiched in between. The battle intent so great that very few people can be in possession of it even with the whole continent in perspective. Odd, who is this person? He's clearly challenging the Zaar family by releasing his battle intent so recklessly. But I don't seem to remember the Zaar family offending such a great expert before." Doubt filled his mind. At this moment, the door was pushed open. The Grand Elder of the Union sternly walked in from outside and began speaking as soon as he came in. The person must have come to find trouble with the Zaar family. They're not weak. President, we might as well go and have a look. Let's hope they heavily injure the Zaar family and reduce the pressure the Union is facing. The president closely sensed the presence and seemed to be in deep thought. A sliver of suspicion gradually appeared on his face. Weird. Grand Elder, why do I feel that this presence is somewhat familiar, as if I have met this person somewhere before, but out of all the impressions of Saint Kings I've come in contact with, there doesn't seem to be someone who matches up to this presence. It really is odd. Just who is this person? The Grand Elder's expression changed with that. A sliver of curiosity appeared on his face as he said, "Since you've mentioned it, I also feel somewhat familiar with this presence, but I can't think of who it is." President, since we can't tell who it is, why don't we go together to see just who this person is? Afterwards, the president and Grand Elder left the Union together with multiple saint rulers. They shot off in the direction of the presence with lightning-like speed. An extremely ordinary-looking old man carefully wiped the tables and the single bookshelf in the Radiant Saint Tower of the Union. Suddenly, the old man paused and a gleam of light immediately exploded in his eyes. He mumbled, "Looks like the city of God is going to get lively again. I wonder which expert the Zaar family has offended." With that, the old man disappeared. He had turned into a faint blur, leaving the tower with lightning speed as he flew to the presence. Jian Chen and the others floated silently several thousand meters in the air above the Zaar family. Soon afterwards, several tremendous presences appeared in the surroundings. They traveled extremely quick, arriving around Jian Chen in just a few seconds. They surrounded him 100 meters away. The saint rulers were the ancestors of the 8 clans. They were all stern, staring at Jian Chen in caution. None of them dared to create a disturbance, as they could all tell that the young man before them was a saint king from his presence alone. They could not afford to provoke him. May I inquire of the senior's great name and exactly what has caused a misunderstanding with our city of God for senior to be so angry? An ancestor clasped his hands at Jianchen as he asked with an extremely polite tone. Jianchen coldly gazed past the ancestors of the 8 clans. His gaze became extremely sharp, like a drawn sword. Wherever he gazed past, the people would feel like they were being stabbed, feeling a vague pain. His gaze caused them to shiver despite the warmth. Senior? Ha 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 ha, I never thought that I'd become a senior to you. People of the 8 clans, have you really forgotten so quickly? Why don't you open up your eyes and carefully look at who I am? Jianchen laughed. His tone was mocking. With that, all the saint rulers began to examine Jianchen. Very soon, one of them recognized him. His expression suddenly changed, becoming overwhelmed by disbelief. He cried out, "Why, you're Yang Yutian. You're Jianchen." The other saint rulers' expressions all changed as well when they heard Jianchen's name. Shock filled all of their eyes. They would have never connected this saint king with a tremendous presence to that young man who had almost died in the city of God all those years ago. The ancestors all thought of something else other than this, which was the protector Changyang clan that supported Jianchen. He was a member of the Changyang protector clan, so his status was incomparable to them. At this moment, 2 streaks of white light tore through the air. They quickly flew over. It was the president and grand elder, arriving on clouds completely condensed from radiant saint force with several experts following them. Yang Yutian. You're Yang Yutian. The president and grand elder both cried out when they recognized Jianchen with a single glance. In that moment, they could no longer maintain their normal composure, both became shocked. They would never have believed that the person with such a tremendous presence was the most outstanding genius in the history of the Union, Yang Yutian. Jianchen also discovered the president and grand elder when they arrived. His gaze immediately became rather mixed with emotions, but he dismissed them very quickly. Right now was not the time for them to catch up. Jianchen, have you come to my city of God to take revenge for what happened all those years ago? A cold female voice rang out in the sky. As it reached the end, a middle-aged woman in a purple dress silently appeared in the air, standing far opposite of Jianchen. We greet Senior. All the ancestors of the 8 clans bowed when they saw this woman. Their faces became filled with respect. The woman was the ancestor of the Zaar family, Zaar Caiyun. She ignored the greetings of the 8 clans and stared fixedly at Jianchen's group. When her gaze landed on Rui Jin and He Yu who stood behind Jianchen, she immediately became extremely stern. You must be the ancestor of the Zaar clan. You wanted to take the winged tiger god from me back then and even wanted to kill me. Do you still remember? Jianchen coldly stared at Zaar Caiyun. Zaar Caiyun could not help but think back to what had happened before. Her gaze towards Jianchen became rather mixed, and she gently sighed. Jianchen, I never thought you'd become so powerful after just a few years. However, I had no choice in the matter before. The winged tiger god was on you, and the beast god continent wanted to invade the Tian Yuan continent because of the winged tiger god. We could only try to give the beast god continent the winged tiger god to save the continent, or all life on it would have been wiped out for sure. Are you willing to see something like that happen? Jianchen remained expressionless. He coldly said, we can deal with our disagreements from years ago later. Ancestor of the Zaar family, I ask you, is the Prince of the Felicity Empire, Bai Jian, with you? Bai Jian is indeed with my Zaar family, Zaar Caiyun gently replied. Her voice possessed no emotion. Hand over Bai Jian. Jianchen demanded. Chapter 1031, Fighting Zaar Caiyun, 1. As soon as Zaar Caiyun heard what Jianchen said, her face immediately changed. She said, Jianchen, I don't care what disagreements you have with Bai Jian, but I hope you can resolve your differences in the future. I cannot hand Bai Jian to you right now. Since you can't hand over Bai Jian, I can only go and get him myself. Jianchen's gaze became rather cold as great battle and killing intent surged from his body. It quickly skyrocketed while the Emperor armament had appeared in his right hand. Destructive chaotic force slowly poured out, revolving around the weapon. Wait! At this moment, an old voice hurriedly rang out. An old man who seemed to be in his 70s shot up from below, carrying a person in his hand. It was Bai Jian. The Zaar family had a total of 2 Saint Kings. One was Zaar Caiyun while the other was the old man before them. Jian Shen, greetings. The old man first greeted Jian Shen before continuing. Jian Shen, I am Zaar Vimer. My Zaar family is willing to hand Bai Jian over to you. I hope we can dismiss any previous disagreements and enmity, and we are willing to apologize to you for what we did before. I hope the slate between us can be wiped clean and we can start anew. The old man spoke with sincerity. He did not want Jian Shen as an opponent at all. Bai Jian could not move since he was in Zaar Vimer's hands. When he heard the old man's words, he paled in fright. He knew exactly what would happen if he ended up in Jian Shen's hands. Save me, Senior Caiyun, save me. If I die, Senior Caiyun will never be forgiven by Senior Hao Wu, Bai Jian loudly pleaded. He placed all his hopes on Zaar Caiyun. Zaar Caiyun's eyes darkened as a sliver of determination appeared. With a slight movement, she silently appeared beside Zaar Vamos and struck at him with a handful of powerful energy. At the same time, she reached for Bai Jian with her left hand. Caiyun, are you crazy? What are you doing? Zaar Vamos' expression drastically changed. He had never thought that Zaar Caiyun would suddenly attack him. He was her great-grandfather after all. Although Zaar Caiyun had moved suddenly, Zaar Vamos was still an experienced Saint King. He reacted in the shortest amount of time. He gathered a thick layer of world force in his hand in an instant and struck out with lightning speed. Bam! The 2 palms collided, and a muffled sound immediately rang through the air. A terrifying ripple of energy radiated in all directions, knocking away all the saint rulers who had gathered in the surroundings to watch. Although Zaar Vamos was Zaar Caiyun's senior and far older than her, his strength was much weaker than hers. He was knocked far away by Zaar Caiyun's casual strike, flying several thousand kilometers before stabilizing himself. On the other hand, Zaar Caiyun stood firmly where she was, like a mountain. Her body did not even tremble, as if her attack before was a careless strike. She had also taken Bai Jian back from Zaar Vamos, trapping him before her left hand in invisible energy. Get down and stay there, Zaar Caiyun coldly said before throwing Bai Jian down into the huge estate of the Zaar family. Zaar Vamos was only shaken up by Zaar Caiyun's attack, so he was not injured. He immediately began to panic inside when he saw that Zaar Caiyun wanted to protect Bai Jian, so he flew over from afar. He pleaded, Caiyun, do you know exactly what you are doing? Have you ever thought about what kind of disaster you would bring upon the clan with what you are doing? Have you ever thought about the clan? Caiyun, stop being silly. Bai Jian has nothing to do with our Zaar family, so just listen to your great-grandfather. Hand over Bai Jian for the clan. It's not worth it to put the entire family into jeopardy over an outsider. Zaar Caiyun did nothing. She only coldly stared at him as a sliver of obvious resentment appeared in the depths of her eyes. She coldly said, do you still remember that matter all those years ago? It was because you forcefully interfered all those years ago that I separated with Hao Wu, agonizing me for my entire life. I only resent that I wasn't strong enough back then, that I could not resist the orders of you seniors, so I could only abide, but now, I am no longer the past Zaar Caiyun. You no longer have the right or power to control what I want to do today. Zaar Vamos felt like his heart was being pierced by a needle as he listened to the cold words of Zaar Caiyun. He painfully said, Caiyun, I know I was wrong about the matter all those years ago. It's me who cannot make it up to you. It was your great-grandfather who destroyed the happiness in your life, but you're still a member of the Zaar family. The blood of the Zaar family runs in your veins. Are you really willing to see the Zaar family fall into depravity? Zaar family, Zaar family. Don't come talking to me about the Zaar family. In your eyes, there's only the Zaar family. Zaar Caiyun suddenly became agitated. She stared at Zaar Vamos with a shocking glare as pain and resentment boiled inside. She gnashed her teeth, since you're so afraid of me bringing trouble to the Zaar family, I, Zaar Caiyun, will be cutting all ties with your Zaar family. From today on, anything I do will have nothing to do with the Zaar family." The experts from the Zaar family and the saint rulers of the 8 clans all had their expressions drastically change with that statement. "No, ancestor, you are a pillar of support for the Zaar family. You can't abandon us." The experts of the Zaar family all fell to their knees in the air and became torn with sorrow. "No, Caiyun, you can't do that. You can't do that. Even with all the mistakes great-grandfather has made, you can't treat the clan like that. The clan cannot go on without you." Zaar Vamo's heart ached as tears streaked down his face. He was filled with regret. The president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union looked at each other after witnessing this. This had far exceeded anything they had imagined. Before they left, they had never thought that such a great disaster would befall the Zaar family. As the most powerful ancestor, Zaar Caiyun had declared that she was leaving the clan. This was a devastating piece of news. Zaar Caiyun closed her eyes in some pain. She had stayed in the Zaar family for a long time, so she had formed some attachments to it. However, she found that love was more important than the clan. In all these years, a certain estrangement has always been present between Hao Wu and me. Since Bai Jian said he can eliminate this estrangement, I am even willing to die here to eliminate it, thought Zaar Caiyun. She then snapped open her eyes, and in that moment, her presence underwent an overwhelming change. It was no weaker than the supreme battle intent from Jian Chen as it surged into the sky. In that moment, sorrow had disappeared from her eyes. She became extremely determined. "Looks like you insist on protecting Bai Jian," snorted Jian Chen. His presence also began to skyrocket, vaguely surpassing Zaar Caiyun's. Zaar Caiyun coldly glared as a light azure sword appeared in her hand. She said, "Jian Chen, if you want to kill Bai Jian, do it over my dead body." With that, she attacked first, stabbing out with a gentle stroke as her sword danced in her hand. The strike seemed simple, but it possessed an overwhelming level of mysteriousness. The sword seemed to be slow, but it fused with space. It had traversed the distance between them in an instant, silently arriving before Jian Chen. Chapter 1032, Fighting Zaar Caiyun, 2. Jian Chen's gaze suddenly turned into a glare. Although Zaar Caiyun's strike did not come with an earth-shaking disturbance, it caused Jian Chen's cautiousness to greatly increase. He felt deeply threatened. Her strength had far exceeded his own. "Let me deal with her." Jian Chen called out to stop Rui Jin and the others. The battle intent from him became even more powerful, and accompanying it was a surging sword chi. Zaar Caiyun was very strong, but she was not invincible. Strands of chaotic force poured from Jian Chen's dantian. They filled up every corner of his body in an instant, pushing his chaotic body to its limits. Every strand of chaotic force was condensed from vast quantities of energy, especially since Jian Chen's chaotic body was at the 3rd heavenly layer. A strand of it was equivalent to all the energy someone who had just stepped into Saint King could condense, which was why Jian Chen's chaotic force was used up extremely slowly when he fought. If he used it to boost his body's defense, the consumption speed would be almost negligible. The Emperor armament in Jian Chen's hand began to gently tremble, and with a gentle sword resonance, it struck out with an aura of destruction. He sent it up to receive Zaar Caiyun's sword without any fear. "Jian Chen, your opponent is at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer and is about to enter the 9th. Be extra careful." Rui Jin's voice suddenly rang in Jian Chen's head. He had seen through Zaar Caiyun's strength with a single glance, which was why he warned Jian Chen. Jian Chen became even sterner. With the Emperor armament, he could only display the strength of a peak 7th heavenly layer Saint King, which was a whole level of cultivation weaker than Zaar Caiyun. The two of them clashed several times with lightning speed. Their collisions were extremely intense, and the activity they created was impressive. Every time their swords came into contact, it was like the collision of worlds, producing great booms and annihilating the space of the surroundings. Violent energy and fragmented sword chi would scatter in all directions, forcing all the saint rulers to continuously retreat to avoid being caught up in the battle. The City of God was one of the 7 capitals of the continent. It had existed for countless years and had experienced battles in the ancient times. However, it still existed, naturally due to its defense. At this moment, a tremendous barrier appeared in the sky above the city, blocking the sword chi and residual energy that splayed out from the battle. Its defense was nowhere on par to the one at Mercenary City, but Jian Shen and Zaar Caiyun's attacks were unable to shake it. At this moment, all the streets and alleys regardless of size were swarming with people. Crowds of people had even gathered on top of various structures, almost causing some roofs to cave in. All the people in the City of God stood with their heads raised to the sky as they unblinkingly observed the rare battle between shocking experts. Coupled with that was the ceaseless sound of discussions. Jian Shen quickly retreated, slightly falling into a disadvantage. Even though Zaar Caiyun possessed the slender physique of a female, each strike from her possessed a great might, enough to destroy the surroundings. Rui Jin, He Yu, and Hong Lian stared unblinkingly at Jian Shen. They were ready to interfere at any moment. Jian Shen was their only hope for them to reunite with their clansmen, so they viewed his life with more importance than anything else. Meanwhile, there was a quaint little wooden hut that stood on a mountain peak in an ancient mountain range several tens of thousand kilometers away from the city. Its wooden boards creaked as they were buffeted by the violent wind, as if the structure would collapse at any moment. A valiant-looking, white-robed, middle-aged man sat in the hut with his eyes closed as he cultivated. He was like an old monk, able to sit there without moving for long periods of time. Suddenly, the man's eyes snapped open. A visible light shot out from his eyes, causing the space that he stared at before him to gently tremble. The man's eyes were extremely bright as he stared in the direction of the City of God in interest. He furrowed his eyebrows slightly and softly murmured, "There's actually a fight in City of God. One of them is Caiyun's presence. Just what is going on?" The middle-aged man was the same person who had ventured to the continent of the 100 races to fight a Class 8 magical beast, as well as the one who had obtained the magical beast's blood to cure the Grand Elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union. He was Hao Wu. Hao Wu sat on his wooden bed with a frown as the light in his eyes flickered. He was hesitating, struggling to come to a decision. He mumbled, "Do I go there and see or not?" After hesitating some more, he finally made up his mind, "Whatever, I just need to look while hiding from afar to see just what is happening." With that, Hao Wu disappeared. He made his way to the City of God silently at an unbelievable speed. Jian Shen and Zaar Caiyun's battle constantly moved away from the City of God, leaving it very soon. They arrived in a desolate mountain range 100 kilometers away and continued to fight intensely there. "Jian Shen, you're not my opponent. If you agree to spare by Jian, we can stop right now." "How about that?" Zaar Caiyun coldly said. "I am naturally not your opponent in terms of strength, but that's not necessarily the case with swordsmanship. I will be claiming by Jian's life." "There is no room for negotiating that," Jian Shen refused without any hesitation. It was impossible for him to spare by Jian. Jian Shen's arm shook violently with that. The Emperor armament became countless blurs that packed the space before him, quickly enveloping Zaar Caiyun. It was impossible to distinguish between illusion and reality with the blurs, so each blur seemed to be real. They all seemed to possess great power. This was all due to Jian Shen reaching the limits of speed. At the same time, Jian Shen used the illusory flash. He moved around Zaar Caiyun like a ghost, striking out faster and faster. Each attack possessed his full strength, equivalent to the full-powered attack from a 7th heavenly layer Saint King. Zaar Caiyun fused with the surrounding space as she calmly dodged Jian Shen's attacks. She did not use her eyes to keep track of the sword blurs, and instead she completely relied on her senses to strike out. She just happened to block the sword blurs with every strike. She coldly said, "If that's the case, do not blame me for not showing mercy." A vast energy surged from Zaar Caiyun, causing the surrounding space to twist. Zaar Caiyun raised her sword to the sky, and it immediately exploded with a dense azure light. Terrifying energy collapsed the surrounding space. Scattered flowers of a heavenly maiden. Zaar Caiyun cried out. The terrifying energy around her sword immediately exploded, turning into extremely dense sword chi that scattered in all directions. Each sword chi was no weaker than a casual strike from an 8th heavenly layer Saint King. Jian Chen's expression slightly changed. He retreated quickly with the illusory flash, using his Emperor armament to block the storm-like attacks of sword chi. The powerful force from each block would shake his arm to the point where it became numb. Freeze, space. A glimmer of light flickered through Zaar Caiyun's eyes. She pointed at Jian Chen with her left hand and the space there immediately froze, trapping and immobilizing Jian Chen. Spurt. 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 With his body restrained, more than 10 powerful sword chis immediately passed through Jian Chen's body, forming the same amount of finger-sized holes. Blood immediately began to run out of the wounds. Jian Chen roared at the sky. Chaotic force immediately erupted from his body, and the Emperor armament began to shine brighter with dark light. A supreme force broke through the space, allowing him to recover his freedom. However, at this moment, Zaar Caiyun had soundlessly arrived before him. Her sword radiated a dazzling azure light as it mercilessly stabbed towards Jian Chen's throat. A sword intent countless times more pure than before began to radiate from Jian Chen at this moment. The wind and clouds immediately began to surge with its appearance, changing the weather. The surrounding air lost its usual peace under the influence of this sword intent, becoming extremely sharp, like it was filled with invisible swords. Chapter 1033, Fighting Zaar Caiyun, 3. The sudden change in Jian Chen's presence immediately led to a change in Zaar Caiyun's expression. She could not help but slightly slow down her strike heading at Jian Chen. This was all because in that moment, Zaar Caiyun seemed to feel that Jian Chen was no longer made of flesh and blood and was instead a sharp sword that stood in the world, radiating with a shocking sword chi. Zaar Caiyun felt like she was looking at a sword when she faced against Jian Chen, which shocked her greatly. Rui Jin, Heiyu, and Hong Lian all tensed up as well. They stared at Jian Chen in surprise. Thoughts similar to what Zaar Caiyun was experiencing appeared in their heads as well. The current Jian Chen did not seem like a person to them, rather a sword, a divine sword. Is this a battle skill? Heiyu stared unblinkingly at Jian Chen as he murmured. The saint rulers of the 8 clans and the people from the Radiant Saint Master Union all stared at Jian Chen in shock from afar as well. Disbelief flooded their faces. In that moment, all of them held their breaths, unwilling to inhale any of the air in the surroundings since it seemed to be filled with sharp sword chi. Just a breath of it would cause piercing pain to their organs. A sliver of haziness appeared in Jian Chen's eyes, but it quickly cleared up. He seemed to have understood something right now, having obtained a grasp on something unclear. With the Emperor armament in his hand, he slowly stabbed out according to a feeling that had sprung up from nowhere in his head. Jian Chen's stroke seemed slow, but it was extremely fast. It was disillusioning. An extremely pure sword chi erupted as the sword traveled, causing the surrounding space to collapse. This was true sword chi. It was extremely sharp and acute, much mightier than sword chi condensed from power. It made people feel like it was unstoppable. As the Emperor armament struck the sword in Zaar Caiyun's hands, the sword chi actually knocked her sword away while the Emperor armament continued on with no reduction in force. It stabbed at Zaar Caiyun's chest with unstoppable momentum. Spurt. The Emperor armament stabbed into Zaar Caiyun's chest, impaling her. In that moment, the sharp sword chi and destructive chaotic force wreaked havoc on Zaar Caiyun's organs, turning them to mush. Zaar Caiyun groaned as she stared at the Emperor armament in her body in disbelief. He refused to believe that she could be injured by Jian Chen with her current strength. But the next moment, her left hand struck Jian Chen's chest with lightning speed. Terrifying saint force surged from her palm, breaking through the defense of Jian Chen's body with supreme power and knocking him away as he vomited blood. Meanwhile, the sword in her chest was withdrawn as Jian Chen catapulted away. Jian Chen, I never thought that you'd have a saint-tier battle skill as well. Since I've seen your saint-tier battle skill, it's time for you to taste mine. Caiyun's power did not decrease. Despite the sliver of paleness on her face, she remained extraordinarily mighty, as if her injuries were nothing to her. A terrifying presence began to radiate from her body, filling up the surroundings as it made the sky shake. At that moment, Zaar Caiyun seemed to have become a war god as she radiated with a tremendous presence, able to destroy her surroundings. The surrounding air became thick as even space began to solidify bit by bit. A terrifying pressure descended. It seemed to originate from the surroundings, immediately causing mountains to collapse and the ground to sink. Casting a Saint-tier battle skill with her strength at the 8th heavenly layer of Saint King, possessed the power to destroy the surroundings. Jian Shen was knocked 1,000 meters away before coming to a halt. Blood ran down from the corner of his lips as a temporary sense of confusion and doubt clouded his eyes. He was still thinking about the moment when he had attacked before. Jian Shen seemed to have entered a wondrous mental state earlier, as if he had become a sword and was no longer a human. The attack before was also performed casually as he followed the feeling, yet the power within it far surpassed what he should have been in possession of, strong enough to injure Zaar Caiyun, who was at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer. However, he had lost that wondrous feeling now. He could not use a similar attack again. Way of the Tyrant Sword, Galaxy-devouring sword. At that moment, a cry rang through the sky. Zaar Caiyun had already reached an altitude of 10 kilometers as she glowed with a deep azure light. Terrifying ripples of energy radiated from her body as a huge, 100-meter-long sword condensed above her. It shot towards Jian Shen with incomparable force. As the sword shot through the sky, the originally bright sky began to darken. Even the energy of the world and invisible world force that filled space itself vanished. The sword of energy seemed to have devoured all the energy and light. Jian Shen became unprecedentedly stern. Zaar Caiyun, even without casting the Saint-tier battle skill, was not someone he could defeat, and with the Saint-tier battle skill, it made it even more impossible for victory. Just resisting would become extremely difficult. With a thought, a golden streak of light immediately shot out from the center of his eyebrows. It quickly transformed into a 100-meter-tall golden tower that shined with a blinding light. The Octaterra Divine Hall had already been devastated by Kaiser, so it was unable to be used so soon. Only the Saint artifact could block Zaar Caiyun's Saint-tier battle skill now. Boom! A deafening sound erupted when the Saint-tier battle skill collided with the Saint artifact. Casting a Saint-tier battle skill with her strength as an 8th heavenly layer Saint King was already on par with the casual strike of a Saint Emperor. It was extremely terrifying, knocking the Saint artifact far away. Way of the Tyrant Sword, Void Annihilating Sword. Zaar Caiyun's cold voice rang out in the sky once again. She did not stop with her attacks. Another 100-meter-long sword condensed above her head, shooting towards Jian Shen at the speed of lightning. The sword was filled with destructive energy, reducing the space of wherever it passed into darkness. Way of the Tyrant Sword, World-obliterating storm of swords. The Way of the Tyrant Sword was a Saint-tier battle skill with 3 attacks. As soon as the second attack was launched, Zaar Caiyun followed up with the third attack. Immediately, 100, or even 1,000, swords appeared around her. All of the swords were condensed from energy, and every single one of them was 10 meters long and radiated with a terrifying aura. None of them were any weaker than the first 2 attacks. Chapter 1034, The Heavenly Enchantress. Muur. Zaar Caiyun consecutively struck out with all 3 attacks of the Way of the Tyrant Sword. Each attack belonged to the upper levels of Saint-tier battle skills, equal to a casual strike from Saint Emperors. Even Saint Kings at great perfection would become heavily injured if the 3 attacks landed on them. Only a similar Saint-tier battle skill could repel it. There were also differences in power among Saint-tier battle skill. The Way of the Tyrant's blade possessed a total of 3 attacks, and each attack was more powerful than the previous one. These factors allowed it to be ranked close to the top among all Saint-tier battle skills. With Zaar Caiyun's great talent, she had comprehended the mysteries of the battle skill to the limit, and she had also reached great proficiency with its use. Her strength at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer combined perfectly with the Saint-Tier battle skill allowed her to use the skill to its full potential. Jian Chen became extremely stern. The battle skill's vast pressure tightly locked onto his entire body, which caused him to feel like he was submerged in mud. Every action felt difficult. The Saint artifact had been knocked away. Although it quickly flew toward him through his mental connection, it would not be able to make it. Looks like I can only use the Octaterra Divine Hall, Jian Chen thought. The Octaterra Divine Hall was in ruins, but Zaar Caiyun's Saint-Tier battle skill was only a casual strike from a Saint Emperor. Its strength was nowhere Kaiser's punch, so the Divine Hall could easily block the strike despite its state. Suddenly, figure flashed before him just as Jian Chen wanted to bring out the Divine Hall. Ruei Jin had appeared silently before Jian Chen, while the sacred dragon's sword in his hand radiated with a terrifying presence. Slivers of origin energy slowly pulsed and radiated with a profound aura. Ruei Jin stood like a steel wall before Jian Chen. As he swung out with his sword, an extremely powerful sword chi immediately shot out toward Zaar Caiyun with a devastating might. The second sword chi from Zaar Caiyun collided with the sword chi from the sacred dragon's sword and immediately produced a deafening boom. The giant sword chi seemed as fragile as tofu and dispersed without much difficulty at all. Ruei Jin's sacred dragon's sword contained origin energy, so when he used it to send out a sword chi, it would possess a sliver of origin energy as well. This was a power that surpassed Saint Emperors, something that belonged to a completely different level. Its strength was beyond suspicion, something incomparable to the powers of this world. The attack from the sacred dragon's sword tore through the other attack like a hot knife through butter. Then, it continued toward Zaar Caiyun's third attack with no reduction in force. Zaar Caiyun's expression suddenly changed when she sensed the power of Ruei Jin's attack. She extended a finger and immediately, the countless sword chi created from the third move changed in trajectory and formed a straight line. They all charged toward Ruei Jin's sword chi with origin energy. With consecutive booms, Ruei Jin's sword chi charged through all the sword chi like a wild beast with stoppable momentum. It caused the smaller sword chi to explode as soon as they made contact. They turned it into surging energy of the world that dispersed in the surroundings. Ruei Jin's single sword chi from the Radiant Dragon's sword broke through two attacks from Zaar Caiyun's Saint-Tier battle skill. In the end, it passed through her chest and disappeared into the horizon. Zaar Caiyun's body trembled violently as agony filled her face. Her presence quickly began to decrease, and she began to fall out of the sky like a broken kite. Caiyun! A cry rang out from afar. Haowu had shot over as a blur with lightning speed as he fused with the surrounding space. He firmly caught Zaar Caiyun. Then, he wanted to flee into the distance. Leave this person behind. Jian Chen did not know Haowu. He immediately cried out when he saw that someone wanted to save Zaar Caiyun. As such, he used the illusory flash and arrived before the unknown individual in an instant. His Emperor armament transformed into a streak of black light as it stabbed mercilessly toward Zaar Caiyun. A 3 fingers wide sword immediately appeared in Haowu's hands. It shone with an earthen yellow light, as it stabbed out like a lightning bolt. 8th heavenly layer Saint King. Jian Chen could sense Haowu's strength once he lashed out. It was actually at the same cultivation level as Zaar Caiyun, just slightly weaker than her as it was not at the peak. Just as Haowu's sword was about to collide with the Emperor armament, the space 1,000 meters away began to twist violently. Vaguely, the rippling space seemed to form a huge zither 1,000 meters long, with 36 clearly visible strings. Ding! The strings began to tremble slowly and produced a gentle note of the zither. A transparent musical note that seemed to be formed from the surrounding space flew out. Then, it simultaneously collided with Jian Chen's Emperor armament and Haowu's Saint weapon with unbelievable speed. Clang! An extremely powerful sound wave erupted when the musical note collided with the Emperor armament and Saint weapon. It seemed to be able to shake up one's soul, shocking people's eardrums into temporary deafness. The terrifying sound wave caused the minds of the Saint rulers who watched from afar to blank out as if their souls were gone. Jian Chen and Haowu's arms shook, and the force knocked their swords aside. The powerful force actually almost knocked the Emperor armament out of Jian Chen's hand. At the same time, the terrifying sound wave turned into an invisible pushing force, so powerful that none of them could resist. It separated Jian Chen and Hao Wu, stopping them from fighting. Just as zither condensed from space could nullify the attacks of two great saint kings with a single note. Its power far exceeded anyone's imaginations. Jian Chen and Hao Wu did not continue their fight. They turned around to look at the zither, as it slowly dispersed. Disbelief flooded their eyes. "It's the heavenly enchantress," Jian Chen murmured, as his heart began to churn. He recognized the zither condensed from space. It was the heavenly enchantress zither of the demonic cry. The appearance was the same. It had the same amount of strings and made the same sound. There was no one else in the world who could play the zither like that other than the heavenly enchantress. However, he had not imagined that the heavenly enchantress' strength would rise to such an unbelievable level after just a few years, which shocked Jian Chen greatly. Hao Wu carried Zaar Caiyun, as he levitated in the sky. He stared blankly at the zither, and his emotions became extremely mixed. Pain was present in his gaze. Moor, is it you?" Hao Wu called out gently, but it resounded through a radius of several dozen kilometers. His voice trembled as it was filled with emotions. "Moor?" Jian Chen immediately became shocked when he heard Hao Wu's words. Does he know the heavenly enchantress? Moor? Is that the heavenly enchantress name? The zither in the sky finally dispersed completely, but the heavenly enchantress never showed up. No one knew where she was. Was she still hiding or had she left long ago? Tears pooled up in Hao Wu's eyes. He stared painfully at the spot that the zither had vanished from and sorrowfully said, "Moor, since you've come, why don't you want to come out and see your dad? It has been so long. Are you still unwilling to forgive Dad?" "Dad?" Jian Chen was shocking inside when he heard that. He turned to Hao Wu suddenly and stared at him fixedly. Surprise filled his face, as he doubted what he had just heard in that moment. Is that middle-aged man the father of the heavenly enchantress? Jian Chen was filled with disbelief, and he was unable to return to his senses. However, if that were the case, it would give an even better explanation to why the heavenly enchantress would secretly interfere. Ruo Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu also stared sternly at the space where the zither had disappeared. They remained silent. That little girl has become so powerful. She is actually able to move around tracelessly. Even I can't sense her presence. A while later, He Yu sighed emotionally. When we met her several years ago on Dragon Island, she was still a saint ruler. How did she become so powerful? Was she always hiding her strength before? If that's really the case, then her ability to conceal her abilities is just too great, Ruo Jin murmured. He was still confused after much thought. That person is very powerful. Just a single note is enough for my soul to tremble. Do you recognize her? Hong Lian stared fixedly on the space where the zither had vanished. She was extremely stern. Ruo Jin nodded and replied, I've met her before. She was with Jian Chen at that time. She uses the zither as a weapon and uses sound to fight people. She walks an extremely rare path of cultivation, but I just never thought that she will become so powerful. Hao Wu. Zaar Caiyun stared at Hao Wu emotionally, as he carried her. She called out gently. Her purple dress had already become dyed red with blood, which made her seem extremely miserable. Hao Wu lowered his head to look at her. His expression became mixed. Caiyun, how are you? Are you heavily injured? Hao Wu's voice was filled with concern. Zaar Caiyun shook her head gently, as tears ran down her cheek. Her voice was filled with tenderness and injustice. Hao Wu, 3,000 years. After 3,000 years, you're finally willing to come see me. Do you know how painful it has been in those years as I waited for you? Hao Wu painfully closed his eyes. His heart ached, and he said, Caiyun, you're so silly. I'm not worth it for you to be like that. It's me who did not have the right to see you. It's me who can't make it up to you. I was the one who failed to live up to you. Zaar Caiyun shook her head gently, as she said weakly, Hao Wu, did you know that although you've once made me suffer so much pain that I would be better off dead, I've never hated you. I knew the clans secretly organized it all. You only fell to the schemes of the seniors of my clan, suffering because of them. I only resented the seniors and only blamed them. I never blamed you. Hao Wu, did you know that I've always been waiting for you these years, waiting for you to apologize to me and beg for my forgiveness? It's a pity that my wish never came true. I waited painfully for you for 3,000 years, yet you didn't even want to come see me. Heartbreak filled Zaar Caiyun's voice. Chapter 1035, Zaar Caiyun's feelings. After Zaar Caiyun buried her feelings in her heart for so long, they finally exploded without restraint. Her bone-piercing tenderness, and her unchangeable stubbornness deeply moved Hao Wu's heart and caused it to tremble. Caiyun, it was me who has no right to see you. I have no right to see you. I'm the one who can't make it up to you. It's me. Hao Wu sobbed painfully with his eyes closed, as sorrow filled his face as well. Bright blood constantly flowed from the corner of Zaar Caiyun's mouth. She slowly raised her jade-white hand and gently touched Hao Wu's weathered face. Her eyes were no longer as cold and emotionless as before. Instead, tenderness filled her eyes. She said softly, Hao Wu, I don't blame you. I've never blamed you, nor have I been mad at you. Because back then, before my family, you had no power to resist. Even I could not avoid the arrangements of my family. But it's different now. We both possess great strength now. We both have the authority to speak and make decisions before the clan. Hao Wu, did you know that I longed for you in every moment of those years, longing to be with you, to spend our days freely like before and living by the sword? Are you willing to be with me now? Zaar Caiyun stared stubbornly at Hao Wu, as anticipation filled her. At that moment, the sky became abnormally silent. Other than the wild wind, there was only Hao Wu and Zaar Caiyun's voice. All the saint rulers from the 8 clans flew over. They stood silently in the distance, as they watched everything unfold. All of their expressions were extremely mixed, while quite a few of them stared fixedly at Zaar Caiyun. Very few of the people among them knew about Zaar Caiyun's past. They all found it extremely unbelievable that their most powerful ancestors' love for Hao Wu was so deep, and that it did not change even after several thousand years. Zaar Vamos stood with the many saint rulers of the Zaar family, as they stared at the two of them with mixed emotions. Deep regret was present. Back then, they had ignored the painful pleas of Zaar Caiyun and forcefully separated the two of them. This was because Hao Wu was just a slightly talented mercenary. He drifted through the continent without a definite residency, and did not possess any background. How could someone like that catch the eyes of the Zaar family that controlled one of the 7 capitals of the city? Meanwhile, Zaar Caiyun was the most outstanding person of the family. She was talented, clever, and a devastating beauty. The previous ancestor of the clan viewed her as a treasure of the clan. They loved her dearly, but how could they let such an impressive clan member marry a mercenary that did not even have a home? As a result, a series of matters followed. However, the Zaar family had never thought that the mercenary who could only be considered as slightly talented would actually have such great potential. He became one of the few supreme experts of the continent after several thousand years and became an existence that the Zaar family needed to treat with importance. However, the Zaar family had just committed too many things that could not be made up to Hao Wu. With the mistakes already committed, it was extremely difficult for them to avoid the consequences, which was why Hao Wu had always stayed in the Holy Empire. However, his relationship with the Zaar family was ambiguous. It was uncertain whether it was hostile or not. Also, Zaar Vamos knew that with Hao Wu's connections, he possessed the power to take revenge against the Zaar family many years ago. However, he never did it, all because of Zaar Caiyun. Jian Shen put away his emperor armament and hovered in the sky without any presence like an ordinary person. He stared quietly at the two of them as mixed emotions filled his eyes. The light in his eyes flickered, as he was thinking of something. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, He Yu, and the 4 protectors of the blood sword sect silently stood with Jian Chen. Hao Wu closed his eyes painfully once more, as he listened to Zaar Caiyun. He did not reply even after a very long time. Zaar Caiyun stared at him for a very long time, before she became dejected. Tears rolled uncontrollably down her cheeks. Hao Wu, I know you still love me. You've always loved me, right? Hao Wu nodded his head gently without saying anything. The main reason why you're unwilling to be with me is because of your daughter, right? You're afraid that your daughter will never forgive you, right? Asked Zaar in a pained voice. I'm sorry, Caiyun. Hao Wu rubbed Caiyun's cheeks gently as pain filled his heart. Clearly, he had always been deeply in love with Zaar Caiyun, but he could not be with his lover due to certain reasons. He had not even met her in 3,000 years. Zaar Caiyun's lips curled into a smile, as she slowly closed her eyes in a satisfied manner. She said gently, Hao Wu, I may not be able to be with you, but I am already very satisfied to be able to feel your embrace once more. With that, her body suddenly jolted. Immediately, blood sprayed from her mouth. She also began to pale, and her expression became horrible. She was close to death. Hao Wu's expression greatly changed. His eyes snapped open in that instant, as he stared at Zaar Caiyun in disbelief. He cried out, Caiyun, Caiyun, what are you doing? You've severed your meridians to your heart. Why are you so muddle-headed? Since living means pain, I might as well just die. It'll be better than suffering every day. Hao Wu, I hope we can meet again in our future lives. Zaar Caiyun's face was ashen. She wanted to die now and did not desire to continue living. Afterward, a faint ball of flames emerged from Zaar Caiyun's head. She was currently using a secret technique to burn her soul. Caiyun, don't do this. Hao Wu paled in fright. He became stunned as everything had occurred just too suddenly. Caiyun, stop. Zaar Vamos also paled, as he cried out in a panic. Ancestor, the saint rulers all became shocked as well, as they called out sorrowfully. Jian Chen's expression also changed slightly, as he stood from afar. He turned to Ruo Jin and said, Senior Ruo Jin, please stop her. Ruo Jin nodded and silently arrived before Zaar Caiyun. He directly struck toward her head with his palm. Don't harm Caiyun. Hao Wu thought that Ruo Jin wanted to kill Zaar Caiyun. He immediately tried to block the attack, as he cried out. If you don't want her soul wiped out, don't interfere, Ruo Jin growled. His left hand changed between seals, and he immediately cast a secret technique of the Dragon Clan to immobilize Hao Wu. His right palm continued mercilessly toward Zaar Caiyun's head. Ruo Jin immediately extinguished the flames on her head, and her soul stopped burning. Ruo Jin had forcefully obstructed her suicide attempt, but her soul was greatly injured. She became unconscious. Hao Wu recovered his freedom very quickly. He retreated hastily with Zaar Caiyun in his arms, and he pulled far away from Ruo Jin. He stared at Zaar Caiyun in panic, as he constantly shook her. Caiyun, Caiyun, what has happened to you? What has happened to you? Zaar Vamos also arrived before Hao Wu. His expression was filled with sorrow, as he stared painfully at the unconscious Zaar Caiyun. He was filled with regret over the decision he had made all those years ago. Her soul is currently extremely heavily injured, and she has fallen conscious. Coupled with the fact that she only wants to die, it'll be impossible for her to wake up in a short amount of time, Ruo Jin said nonchalantly, as he stared deeply at Zaar Caiyun. Chapter 1036, Meeting Yang Ling Again. 1. Caiyun, you're so muddle-headed. You really are so muddle-headed. Why did you do something like this? Why? Hao Wu was torn with grief. He touched Zaar Caiyun's pale face with his coarse hand. His heart ached. Zaar Vamos' face was streaked with tears. He too was in great sorrow when he saw the pained state of his great-granddaughter since she was like this due to him. It was because of the matter all those years ago that led to the horrible relationship between him and Zaar Caiyun. Sigh, I regret, Zaar Vamos said painfully. Zaar Caiyun's state would severely affect the power of the clan. Caiyun, wake up. Quickly wake up. I'll take you back home, to the home that belongs to us. We'll live the life we once had, Hao Wu murmured quietly since he wanted to wake her up. However, Zaar Caiyun's eyes did not even twitch, as if she had not heard him at all. Hao Wu, give Caiyun to me. The Zaar family will use everything we have to save her, Zaar Vamos said to Hao Wu. A sharp light immediately flickered through Hao Wu's sorrowful gaze when he heard that. He stared at Zaar Vamos in resentment and coldly said, Zaar Vamos, think about what you did all those years ago. What dignity do you have left to take Caiyun from me? You don't even have that right. Zaar Vamos, if it weren't for Caiyun, did you really think that your Zaar family would have been able to be as carefree as it is now? Hao Wu's words were like drenching Zaar Vamos in cold water. His entire body became cold as he stood there blankly. His soul seemed to have left his body. Then, Hao Wu looked at Jian Chen. He quickly glanced past Ruo Jin and He Yu from the corner of his eyes. A sliver of fear appeared in the depths of his eyes as he said, Jian Chen, Caiyun is no longer a member of the Zaar family. Now that she has fallen into such a miserable state, I hope you can wipe the slate between you and her. Any matters of the Zaar family have nothing to do with. Does that satisfy you? Jian Chen's expression was extremely mixed. He slowly nodded and said, Senior Hao Wu, allow me to ask you one question. What is your relationship with the heavenly Enchantress? Although Jian Chen had already guessed that Hao Wu was her father, he wanted to confirm it. Hao Wu's face immediately darkened with that. He said dejectedly, she's my daughter, but she does not recognize me as her father. Hao Wu became filled with pain when Jian Chen mentioned the heavenly Enchantress. His heart ached. Although he had known it would be like this beforehand, Jian Chen still gasped inside after he learned this news from Hao Wu personally. Jian Chen calmed down very quickly. He slowly flew to Hao Wu's side and stared at the unconscious Zaar Caiyun with mixed feelings. After hesitating slightly, Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes. Immediately, a ball of extremely dense, milky white light began to radiate from Jian Chen. It encased his entire body and obscured his appearance. Jian Chen seemed to have become a radiant god that was bathing in the light. His stern expression was filled with a divine awe, as if he could not be impinged upon. This is the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. I never thought he had already reached the 7th class. The President and Grand Elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union both cried out when they saw this. They were astounded. Although Jian Chen had taken away the Saint artifact of the Union, it was not easy for a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. It was definitely unprecedented on the continent for someone at Jian Chen's age to reach the 7th class. He really is a prodigy. Though it's a pity, the President shook his head as he sighed. Pity flooded his face. Jian Chen had personally used the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force to heal Zaar Caiyun. His decision regarding Zaar Caiyun was displayed through this action. Although he and the Heavenly Enchantress were not married, matters that only occurred after marriage had happened between them. The Heavenly Enchantress was Hao Wu's daughter while Hao Wu and Zaar Caiyun were deeply in love with each other. Their deep affection had moved Jian Chen. Jian Chen had no idea just what had happened between the three of them to cause such a complicated situation, but just from their relationship on the surface, Jian Chen was certain of his choice. If he continued his attempts on Zaar Caiyun's life, Hao Wu would definitely fight him to the death. His relationship with Hao Wu would also become one of hostility, which was not something Jian Chen wanted to see. Also, the Heavenly Enchantress had secretly prevented the battle between the two of them just as they were about to clash. Perhaps, the Heavenly Enchantress did not want to see her father fight with Jian Chen in such a life-or-death fashion. He had learned from Hao Wu that the Heavenly Enchantress had never recognized him as a father, but they were still father and daughter after all. The wound from Ruo Jin's sacred dragon sword was rather severe. The powerful origin energy had devoured her flesh and formed a fist-sized hole, but with the regenerative properties of Radiant Saint Force origin energy, Jian Chen only needed a single strand to completely heal Zaar Caiyun. However, she did not awaken. Jian Chen's actions greatly moved Hao Wu, and he constantly thanked Jian Chen. He knew Jian Chen's background very well. Jian Chen was someone that even the 10 protector clans were helpless against. Moreover, he was followed by 2 extremely powerful experts that even human and magical beast saint emperors could do nothing but flee against. However, Hao Wu had no idea about the connection between Jian Chen and his daughter even now. I've healed all her wounds with my radiant saint force. Though I am helpless when it comes to the injuries of her soul. Jian Chen gently sighed. I will find ways to cure Caiyun's injuries of the soul. It's me who can't make it up to her as well as me who caused her to become like this. I will use the rest of my life to make it up properly to Caiyun. Hao Wu focused his attention on Zaar Caiyun's face. Then, he left with her in his arms. He disappeared into the horizon very quickly. Caiyun. Zaar Vamos sorrowfully cried out as he stared blankly in the direction she had disappeared in. He was filled with worry and a deep unwillingness to part with her. At this moment, more and more saint rulers hurried over from the surroundings. They watched from afar. They had all been drawn over by the great battle earlier. Jian Chen casually glanced past the empty space up ahead. His soul was extremely powerful, so he could clearly feel the Saint Kings hiding there. Within them included the ancestor of the Kara clan. Jian Chen was no longer in the mood to settle his disagreements with the 8 clans and the Zaar family after what had happened with Hao Wu. He coldly said to the people of the 8 clans, I will not pursue the matter of you heavily injuring me all those years ago because of Senior Hao Wu. You may have escaped death, but you have not escaped punishment. With that, all the saint rulers of the 8 clans relaxed. All of them revealed expressions of relief, like they had just escaped a disaster. What they feared the most was Jian Chen taking revenge for what had happened all those years ago, since they would be helpless if he actually took action. Jian Chen, my Qing family is filled with deep regret regarding what we did to you all those years ago. To thank you for not killing me, I will heavily injure myself as the price. To give brother Jian Chen an explanation, the saint ruler of the Qing family spoke first. He then punched himself in the chest. Blood sprayed from his mouth into the air as he became heavily injured. Afterward, the other saint rulers of the 8 clans all heavily injured themselves as well. They were paying the price for what they did all those years ago, as well as giving Jian Chen an explanation and thanking him for not killing them. This scene caused a great discussion to break out among those who were watching. They all began to whisper to one another. The enmity between Jian Chen and the 8 clans from all those years ago could be considered to have reached a complete conclusion. Although Hao Wu and Zaar Caiyun disrupted Jian Chen's plans and made him deviate from them, it still could be considered a perfect conclusion. Then, Jian Chen arrived before the group of people from the Radiant Saint Master Union after he dealt with the 8 clans. He clasped his hands and said with mixed emotions, Jian Chen greets the President and the Grand Elder. Chapter 1037, Meeting Yang Ling Again, 2. The President and the Grand Elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union both sighed deeply inside, as they looked at the person who was once the most outstanding prodigy of the Union. Their emotions were greatly mixed. Once upon a time, the two of them had treated Jian Chen as the future of the Radiant Saint Master Union. They even raised him as the successor of the President. The President had even used his own disciple, Yun Tian, to discipline Jian Chen, with the hope that he could grow quickly and become someone great that could take charge. He had hoped that Jian Chen could take up the position of developing the Union. Unfortunately, the heavens played a huge joke on them. The Yang Yutian who had joined the Union as a Radiant Saint Master all those years ago was a fighter as well, and one that had become Saint Ruler. Since ancient times, there had never been a fighter that was also a Radiant Saint Master. As a result, the saying that one could not be both a fighter and Radiant Saint Master at the same time had arisen. No one had ever broken this fact even after the countless years the saying had existed. However, the revelation of Yang Yutian's identity as a fighter broke this fact that had remained for countless years and greatly affected the Union. It basically shook it to its core. Other than that, Jian Chen's other identity also greatly shocked the high-ranking members of the Union. He was actually a member of a protector clan, the Changyang clan. The protector clans were the ultimate force of the Tian Yuan continent. They had existed since ancient times and possessed history even lengthier than Mercenary City. Even the three great empires possessed nothing close to contending with them. They were the undebatable rulers of the continent, and the Radiant Saint Union was as weak as a child compared to them. They would crumble in the first clash if they were to ever fight. The president and grand elder of the Union looked at Jian Chen with extremely mixed emotions. They remained silent for a very long time while affection and resentment mixed within their eyes. To them, Jian Chen was someone worthy of their affection and resentment. They loved his talent as well as the fact that he could bring a bright future to the Union, while they hated Jian Chen's second identity. Moreover, he took away the saint artifact all those years ago and threatened the Union. They knew that Yang Yutian, who had become the most outstanding prodigy in all of the Union's history and had extremely great potential of reaching Class 8 as a Radiant Saint Master, would probably never return again. Sigh. After a very long while, the Grand Elder exhaled deeply at the sky and said, Jian Chen, you've finally returned to the Tian Yuan continent. I never thought that it would take several years before we met again. Your strength has increased once again, which is unbelievable. Jian Chen, come visit the headquarters of our union whenever you have the time. There are some matters I want to discuss with you. The president spoke as well. Jian Chen knew that the president wanted to talk about the saint artifact, so he did not decline. He agreed, President, I'll go with you to the union after I deal with the matters here. The president also began to smile from the bottom of his heart as he nodded many times. Jian Chen used the illusory flash to move, and his steps became blurs. With every casual footstep, he would traverse several kilometers. Although Jian Chen did not go ahead and comprehend it purposefully, he had become more and more proficient with it after using the special movement battle skill many times. His grasp of it was currently improving unconsciously. After around a dozen steps, Jian Chen had traversed over 100 kilometers. He had returned to the City of God. The barrier around the city had disappeared as well. It had returned to its previous state. Rui Jin, He Yu, Hong Lian, and the four protectors of the Blood Sword sect followed behind Jian Chen. Behind them were Zaar Vamos and the saint rulers of the 8 clans, as well as the various experts who had come to watch. Jian Chen hovered over the City of God and directly flew to the mansion of the Zaar family. Bai Jian remained in the huge estate, standing there in the same position as before. Panic flooded his face. Zaar Vamos had frozen Bai Jian before, which had immobilized him. Although Zaar Caiyun had snatched him away later, she did not remove the force that trapped in place, so all he could do was stand there obediently. He could not even flee even when he wanted to. Bai Jian, I'd like to see who will be saving you now. Jian Chen stared icily at Bai Jian. Powerful killing intent radiated from Jian Chen without any restraint. It caused the surrounding temperature to plummet. Bai Jian's expression immediately changed when he saw Jian Chen return safe and sound. He became absolutely horrified, and fear flooded his face. Don't kill me, Jian Chen, don't kill me. I am great friends with the Heavenly Enchantress. If you kill me, the Heavenly Enchantress will never forgive you. She will hate you for the rest of her life, Bai Jian said with a trembling voice. He had already become pale white since he knew he was facing the moment of his death. Bai Jian, if it were not for the experts of the Changyang clan arriving in time for the matter of Flame City, all my good friends probably would have died by your hands, and I have even heard that you were interested in my fiancé, Yu, right? Jian Chen's gaze became even colder as killing intent boiled in his heart. No, that's not true, Jian Chen. That's not true. It's all a misunderstanding. Bai Jian paled in fright. He frantically denied the accusations and wanted to explain himself. Jian Chen was not convinced at all. He coldly said, Don't worry, Bai Jian, I won't kill you so easily. With that, Jian Chen threw a vicious kick at Bai Jian's dantian and a sliver of chaotic force immediately entered it. The chaotic force destroyed his saint weapon while his dantian completely collapsed. The powerful force had even crushed his organs into mush. Bai Jian produced an extremely miserable shriek. With his saint weapon destroyed, he also became extremely heavily injured. Although he would not die as long as his soul was still present as a saint ruler, his strength plummeted. Afterward, Jian Chen extended a finger, and a sliver of chaotic force shot into the center of Bai Jian's eyebrows in the form of a sharp sword qi. It heavily injured his soul and prevented him from being able to flee in the form of a soul. Bai Jian immediately became haggard thanks to this soul injury. He arrived at death's door, and he even lost the power to shriek out in pain. He was in so much agony that tiny droplets of sweat covered his forehead. Jian Chen, you won't be dying an easy death, Bai Jian cursed through his teeth, but his voice was extremely weak. He knew he was done for now that Jian Chen had destroyed his saint weapon, and his soul was injured. Jian Chen ignored Bai Jian's cursing. He did not need to get mad at someone who was about to die. Then, he sucked Bai Jian into the artifact space and left the Zaar family estate. Jian Chen gathered in a beautifully decorated room with the president and grand elder on the very top floor. After a short talk, Jian Chen gained an even better grasp of the current union. A great uproar had indeed erupted in the upper echelon of the union with the loss of the saint artifact, almost causing the union to collapse. In the end, they managed to emerge safely, all because of the secret assistance from the three great clans of the Holy Empire, which allowed the union to survive the disaster. The Radiant Saint Master Union was not a weak force. As long as they existed within the Holy Empire, they remained a force of the Holy Empire. This was why the three great clans did not wish to see the union collapse, since experts of the union would join other organizations or the other two empires. This would strengthen their enemies. The union and the three great clans silenced the matter regarding the loss of the saint artifact to prevent it from spreading any further. Then, they announced some other reason to cover the truth. Jian Chen had even learned from the president and the grand elder that all the Radiant Saint Masters that placed in the top 10 last time had failed to reach Class 7 other than him. This included Liwei, the person known to be the greatest Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. None of them fused with the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force successfully. Jian Chen, our union may have lost the saint artifact, but as long as the origin energy source in our possession doesn't run out, our union can continue existing. According to your request many years ago, we have been devoting all our efforts in finding items that can store the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. We've gathered quite a few, and they're all in this space ring. I hope you can help us collect some more origin energy the next time the seal of the artifact loosens, the president pleaded. He knew that the existence of the current union would all be up to Jian Chen. If the union lost its source of Radiant Saint Force origin energy, it would no longer have the power to gather all the high-class Radiant Saint Masters of the continent. Jian Chen accepted the space ring. President, don't worry. I will definitely store enough origin energy for you the next time the seal loosens. I will be able to relax if that's the case. The president and the grand elder both became relieved. Their thumping hearts calmed down, and they became much more at ease. Jian Chen pondered in silence as he sat in the chair. Reminiscence filled his eyes. Scenes of when he was in the City of God as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master flashed through his head again. At that moment, he remembered his bodyguard back then, Ling. That fellow was even willing to throw his own life away to protect Jian Chen. There was also that chatterbox, Quan Yukai, who always stuck to him in an attempt to obtain the radiant arts. Ling loyalty had once moved Jian Chen deeply. Although he was just a bodyguard, Jian Chen had never treated him as an outsider during the time he spent with him. He treated him as a friend, even though he was just a Heaven Saint Master. President, Grand Elder, may I meet my bodyguard from back then, Ling? Jian Chen asked. It was impossible for the president to not fulfill Jian Chen's small request. He immediately sent people to contact Ling. Then, he smiled and said, there were 2 people of the top 10 from last time who succeeded a little in fusing with the origin energy. One of them was the chosen daughter of the Kara clan, Liwei. The other was Quan Yukai, who you once knew. Quan Yutsai's talent is pretty impressive as well, possessing the potential to reach Class 7, so I assigned Ling to protect him. Chapter 1038. Liwei. Jian Chen had no idea how he should react when he heard this news. They had not seen each other for so many years, yet Quan Yukai was actually with Ling. Quan Yukai is shameless and feels unreliable sometimes. He would stick to me all the time and constantly chatter without end. While Yang Ling's a quiet person. He's simple and honest, so it sure would be interesting if the two of them are together, Jian Chen thought inside. Very soon, the burly Yang Ling was brought over by some people, and following him was the white-robed Quan Yukai who bore a detailed, blue badge on his chest. Oh wow, Brother Yang Yutian, it really is you. When I heard the elders say that Brother Yang Yutian had come back for vengeance with the 8 clans, I didn't believe it at first, but it really is you now that I've seen you again. Quan Yotsai's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Jian Chen. Joy filled his face, and he shot over to Jian Chen's side as if he had not even seen the president and grand elder. He walked around Jian Chen as he examined him, asking in disbelief, Brother Yang Yutian, the elders can't be right, can they? Have you really come back to find revenge with the 8 clans, and that intense battle that just happened in the sky of the city can't have been you, right? The president furrowed his brows when he saw how Quan Yukai behaved. He chastised with a deep voice, Quan Yukai, do not be impolite to Brother Jian Chen. Ah. Teacher, Grand Elder, the two of you are here as well. Quan Yukai greets teacher and the Grand Elder. Quan Yukai only just seemed to have noticed the presence of the president and Grand Elder. He immediately stopped acting in such a joking manner and greeted the two of them courteously. After failing to fuse with the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force, he was taken on as a student of the president. However, his identity was nowhere near as great as Jian Chen and Yun Tian from before, who were disciples of the president. His relationship with the president was more akin to teacher and student. Quan Yukai admired the president and Grand Elder greatly inside. He immediately became well-behaved before the two of them, standing to one side obediently and quietly. He would always stare at Jian Chen, wanting to say something but holding back while the president and Grand Elder were present. Jian Chen also became cheerful when he saw his acquaintances of the past. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling could not be considered life and death comrades, they were still friends that had once accompanied him. Quan Yukai, let's talk about the old days later, Jian Chen smiled at Quan Yukai as he stood there obediently. Quan Yukai nodded firmly. He only gave a small reply and did not say anything else as he glanced at the president and Grand Elder in an annoyed manner. Jian Chen looked to Yang Ling. He examined him in detail. After being separated for 10 years, Yang Ling was exactly the same as before with no changes whatsoever. Yang Ling, it's been several years since we last met. How have you been in those years? Jian Chen smiled. Yang Ling's gaze toward Jian Chen was slightly mixed. He then clasped his hands at Jian Chen courteously. Yang Ling greets the esteemed Master Yang Yutian. I thank Master Yang Yutian for your concern. Yang Ling has been very well in the past few years. Yang Ling, you can just call me Jian Chen. Jian Chen is my real name, said Jian Chen. Yes, Master Jian Chen, Yang Ling clasped his hands as he replied. He was just as polite as before. Jian Chen sat back on a large, comfy couch as he stared at Yang Ling in interest. He said steadily, Yang Ling, have you ever hated me? Jian Chen treated Yang Ling with great importance. Yang Ling's status in Jian Chen's heart had far exceeded Quan Yotsai's, or even a few ordinary friends. Back then on the ferry on Fragrance River, he faced the assassination attempt of the 8 clans. Yang Ling was even willing to sacrifice his own life to protect Jian Chen and let him flee, which deeply touched Jian Chen. Yang Ling dares not. Yang Ling completely treated himself as a servant, possessing no pride as a heaven saint master. He spoke extremely politely. Yang Ling, do you still remember my promise back then? I once said to you that I will help you out given the chance. I will be following through with what I said now. Are you willing to follow me and become a saint ruler? Jian Chen swore. He was extremely confident in allowing Yang Ling reach saint ruler. Yang Ling's eyes immediately lit up when he heard about becoming a saint ruler. He ravished with joy, but the light in his eyes soon darkened. He glanced at the president of the union. The president chuckled, Yang Ling, to be able to follow Brother Jian Chen would be the greatest fortune you will ever come across in your life. Why don't you hurry to thank Brother Jian Chen? I believe you'll be very successful in the future with Brother Jian Chen's help and become a supreme expert. Yang Ling behaved like he had just been pardoned from a crime. He became emotional and clasped his hands courteously to Jian Chen. I thank Master Jian Chen's kindness very much. Brother Jian Chen, we'll give Yang Ling to you. From now on, he is your person. The union will no longer interfere with anything he does. The president expressed his position on Jian Chen once again. With Jian Chen's current status and strength, the union could only obediently abide even if he wanted to take someone away from the union. At that moment, a purple-badged elder walked into the room carrying an embroidered box. He directly made his way to the president and said, "President, I have brought you the item you want from the treasury." The president accepted the box from the elder and then slowly opened it. 3 white, fist-sized rocks lay peacefully inside. They were all cubes and were transparent, like some type of high-quality jade. Brother Jian Chen, these 3 rocks are known to us as flaming jadeite. It's an extremely rare rock on the continent and cannot be found easily. Each piece is invaluable and extremely hard to find or purchase within the markets. The rock can store energy, and the power of the energy it can store depends on its quality. If a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler poured his power into it, even an ordinary person would be able to unleash a strike from a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler with the rock. This would apply to Saint Kings as well. The 3 flaming jadeites in my hand right now are of the highest quality and are completely able to store the power from a Saint King at great perfection. Brother Jian Chen is someone with a family, so I'd like to gift these 3 rocks to Brother Jian Chen hoping that it can help out Brother Jian Chen a little. The president brought the box before Jian Chen before passing it to him. Jian Chen could not help but think back to when he first took part in the competition within the artifact spirit after hearing the president's explanations. A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master of the Zaar family had brought in a wondrous rock from outside and used it to dish out the strike of a Saint King. By the looks of it, the rock should have been a flaming jadeite that the president had just told him about. I thank the president for his grand gift. Jian Chen did not turn it down. He happily accepted the 3 rocks. The rocks could store the power of Saint Kings at great perfection, which meant that even ordinary people could produce a strike equal to Saint Kings at great perfection with the rock given that someone had poured energy into it beforehand. This was a valuable treasure to Jian Chen. Jian Chen stayed at the union for 1 whole day. He spoke a lot with the president and grand elder and had even mentioned Yun Tian in their conversations. However, Jian Chen learned that Yun Tian had disappeared. Even when they used a secret technique to scour the continent, they failed to find his tracks. By the time Jian Chen left the union, the sun had already set and darkness had descended, filling the entire world. Everything had been blanketed by the darkness of night. Brother Jian Chen, it's been 10 years since we last met, and who knows how long it will be until we meet again. Tonight, everything will be on me. I'd like to invite you to the most famous ferry of Fragrance River. Will brother give me that honor? Quan Yukai laughed. He had returned to his jolly mood like before once he left the union. Jian Chen did not turn down Quan Yotsai's suggestion. He took a horse carriage to Fragrance River outside the city with Quan Yukai and the silent Yang Ling, as well as He Yu and Hong Lian. Rui Jin, on the other hand, had entered the saint artifact with the flaming jadeites Jian Chen had obtained from the president to pour energy into them. Meanwhile, the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect had been dismissed by Jian Chen. Jian Chen could not help but close his eyes as he sat in the rocky carriage. In that moment, his heart had become tranquil, which rarely happened. He felt like he had returned to before, back to when he was an esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. That night, Quan Yukai had paid the price. He booked the most famous ferry of Fragrance River, costing him several 100,000 crystal coins. However, that was nothing to a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. The ferry rode through the wind and waves at night as gentle music played. Floating on the river, the 2 banks danced with lamplight as the sound of activity buzzed. This was the liveliest place every night, the place where aristocrats would gather. On the deck, Jian Chen, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling toasted and drank heartily. They talked about everything while even the cat-sized white tiger had been let out of the artifact spirit. It was currently tasting and eating the various delicacies on the table. Yu remained in the artifact space, using many low-class magical beasts to increase her strength. She possessed the secret protection of the artifact spirit, so Jian Chen did not worry about any dangers that would threaten her life. He Yu and Hong Lian had followed Jian Chen along, but they had no interest in participating in something like this with their age. They sat at the rear of the ship as they rested with their eyes closed. A white strike of light tore through the dark night sky, traveling to the ferry where Jian Chen was. Afterward, it slowly landed on the deck. Jian Chen, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling all looked at the uninvited person. It was an alluring beauty in a white dress who seemed to be in her 20s. Yang Yutian, you've disappeared for 10 years. You've finally decided to come back. The beauty smiled gracefully as she made her way elegantly up to Jian Chen. I never thought that it would actually be Miss Kara Liwei. Even after so many years, Miss Liwei is still as beautiful as before with no change through the years. Jian Chen smiled back at the lady. She was the young lady of the Kara clan, Kara Liwei. Chapter 1039. The divine hall hidden at the bottom of the river. Kara Liwei arrived before Jian Chen with her eyes shining. She smiled. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Your temperament has undergone a huge change. It is like you're a completely new person. Yang Yutian, 10 years later, I am still the me from before, while you have stopped being your past self long ago. Reminiscence clouded her beautiful eyes, as she seemed to recollect everything in the past. Jian Chen smiled silently at Kara Liwei's words, and he replied, Miss Liwei really does like to joke. It may be 10 years since we last met, but I am still my old self. Even if my status and strength differ from before. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling drank together. They understood what was going on, so they excluded Jian Chen and refused to talk to him. However, they would glance at Jian Chen and Kara Liwei at times, purposefully or otherwise. Really? Kara Liwei smiled. She extended her slender, white fingers and poured wine into an empty cup on the table. Then, she glanced at Jian Chen and said, since the current Yang Yutian is still the former Yang Yutian, do you still remember that in the artifact space, I saved you once? Of course, I remember. At that time, I was caught in a tight encirclement within the artifact space. It was all because Miss Liwei arrived in time. You kept a portion of enemies busy, which allowed me enough time to cast Judgment Sword and change the situation, Jian Chen said with a smile. Then, how do you intend on paying me back for assisting you all those years ago? Her eyes glowed with an alluring light as she stared unblinkingly at Jian Chen's weathered face. She slightly smiled. When the seal of the Saint artifact loosens in 40 years, I will do everything I can to assist Miss Liwei in breaking through. Does this satisfy Miss Liwei? I hope the esteemed Yang Yutian does not break his promise and upsets me, Kara Liwei quietly responded in a delicate and touching fashion. Afterward, she raised her cup to Jian Chen and said, Come, Yang Yutian. I want to toast you a cup for my successful breakthrough to Class 7 in 40 years' time. Kara Liwei brought the cup of wine close to Jian Chen's lips. She stared at him with a slight flush on her beautiful face. Jian Chen had even caught a whiff of her faint fragrance from her fingers. The smell was intoxicating. Kara Liwei was a beauty that outshined the moon. If Jian Chen did not possess a tough mental fortitude, he would have let down his guard long ago. Jian Chen chuckled as he accepted the cup of wine from Kara Liwei. Then, he downed it completely. Yang Yutian, is the wine good? Kara Liwei suddenly asked, as her eyes continued to shine. This wine is valuable, so of course it's, Jian Chen replied subconsciously. However, before he could finish his words, Kara Liwei suddenly leaned forward. She kissed Jian Chen with her cherry-red lips. Jian Chen was caught off guard. He had never thought that Kara Liwei would do something like this, and he immediately became stunned. However, he returned to his senses very soon. Their lips separated, and Kara Liwei blushed. She slowly backed away with a slight smile. Spurt. Quan Yukai suddenly spat out a mouthful of wine while he was drinking heartily with Yang Ling. All of it landed on Yang Ling's face, as he too became stunned. Yang Ling used his clothes to wipe his face before looking at Quan Yukai in confusion. Master Quan Yukai, why have you spat all the wine onto my face? It's such a pity for such good wine. Miss Liwei, you, Jian Shen was astounded, as he stared blankly at Kara Liwei. Kara Liwei giggled. Her smile was charming, while her blush deepened. She said, Yang Yutian, you must always remember that you owe me the most important thing. With that, dense radiant saint force suddenly began to condense into a cloud beneath Kara Liwei. She did not stick around. Instead, she stepped onto the cloud and left the ferry. She made her way to the riverbank. Yang Yutian, I might as well pass on a message from the ancestor of my clan. The Kara clan wishes to be eternal friends with you. Kara Liwei's voice rang through the sky. As her voice subsided, she disappeared into the darkness as well. Jian Shen, what are you waiting for? Go chase her. She's about to run away. Quan Yukai put down his cup and frantically called out to Jian Shen. He was panicking. Jian Shen looked in the direction that Kara Liwei had disappeared. He shook his head with a forced smile and gently sighed. Come, let's keep drinking. My God. You missed such a good opportunity. If you chased her, nothing would have been impossible. Regret filled Quan Yukai. Kara Liwei's appearance was only a small deviation from their plans. They returned to their previous state very quickly, continuing to heartily drink and talk. At that moment, the tight-robed Yu stood in a grassy plain within the artifact space. Beside her lay a 5-meter-long blue wolf littered with sword slashes. There had been bloodshed, and it had stopped breathing long ago. Yu wiped away the sweat on her forehead as she stood before the wolf's corpse. She murmured, why do I suddenly feel so uneasy? After a period of silent thought, she called out to the empty space, artifact spirit. This one greets the mistress. What does the mistress require? The artifact spirit appeared beside Yu out of nowhere. It was extremely polite, as if it was talking to Jian Shen. Send me out of here, Yu said to the artifact spirit. Yes, mistress, replied the artifact spirit. He immediately contacted Jian Shen. After he gained Jian Shen's approval, he let Yu out. Yu's appearance on the ferry naturally piqued Yang Ling and Quan Yotsai's curiosity. As a result, Jian Shen introduced Yu to them before continuing to drink. Yu changed into a white dress in the ship's hold, regaining her elegance and nobility as a princess. Afterward, she sat quietly next to Jian Shen and helped refill his cup. She did not speak a lot. At that moment, Hong Lian and He Yu's expressions changed. They sat at the rear of the ship. Both of their eyes suddenly snapped open. Then, they leaped to their feet. A gleam of light flashed in their eyes as they glared at the surface of the river. There's something wrong with the river, Hong Lian said with a deep voice. Her eyes were dyed red at that moment, as if flames rolled within them. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the void and see through all illusions. A while later, she became surprised. She said with a deep voice, how is that possible? How can a divine hall hide at the bottom of the river? What? A divine hall? He Yu was also surprised as disbelief filled his face. Hong Lian nodded as she stared fixedly at the bottom of the river. The divine hall has been sealed at the bottom, which concealed all of its presence. Now that the seal has eroded with time, the divine hall is currently breaking free and floating to the top. As soon as Hong Lian finished speaking, the peaceful surface of the river suddenly began to churn. Huge bubbles emerged like boiling water. The entire river began to rise at a visible rate, flowing onto the banks of the river very quickly. Chapter 1040, The Bright Moon Divine Hall. As the water quickly rose, the deck below Jian Shen no longer remained stable. It began to violently rock. This sudden occurrence sort of surprised Jian Shen and the others. They immediately stopped drinking. Quan Yotsai's face twitched, and he instantly sobered up. The ferry started to rock more and more violently, which made it harder and harder to keep upright. The drinking table on the deck also began to violently tremble, as various dishes crashed onto the deck. What's happening? Why is the ferry suddenly rocking so violently? Are we capsizing? Quan Yukai called out. He looked around with interest. The current situation confused him. Yang Ling immediately became alert, and his drunkenness vanished as well. His eyes shone as he glared around, prepared for battle at any moment. Yu Yu hugged Jian Chen's arm, but she seemed calm. It was like she would be safe even if the sky collapsed as long as she was by Jian Chen's side. Jian Chen slowly put down his wine cup as he nonchalantly stood on the deck. He expanded his presence, which quickly reached into the water. However, Jian Chen became surprised very quickly. Disbelief flooded his face, as he said to Quan Yukai and Yang Ling, "Leave the ferry and contact the sailors of the ship. Tell them to dock to the side immediately." With that, Jian Chen took to the sky with Yu Yu and flew 100 meters into the air. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling were completely clueless about the current situation, they needed to follow Jian Chen's instructions. The two of them immediately ran below deck to contact the sailors. Then, they took to the sky as well and left the ferry. He Yu and Hong Lian also took to the air and reached an altitude of 100 meters from the rear of the ship. They gathered with Jian Chen, and looked down at the surface of the river. The water of Fragrance River climbed higher and higher. It had already flowed over the banks and flooded into the distance. At this moment, the water levels alarmed all the people on the two sides. Some stronger people began to use their various abilities and climbed the trees around them. The ferries in the center of the river also began to slowly tip and sank one by one. The sailors on the boats had all leaped off. They were currently swimming toward the banks in confusion and alarm. Splash! Suddenly, a huge splash exploded, which created a huge ripple that was over 1,000 meters wide. In that instant, a silvery white divine hall slowly broke through the water. As it flickered with light, it surged into the sky as water surged off of it. Everything unfolded on a grand scale. What is this thing? Quan Yukai was struck dumb. He stared at the silvery white divine hall as it rose into the air. Shock filled his face. Yang Ling, who hovered beside him, also became wide-eyed. They could not recognize the divine hall with their current level of knowledge. The divine hall shot into the air while emitting a hazy, silver light. A sacredness permeated the hall, as it lit up the dark night sky to the point where it seemed like daytime. The noisy banks became quiet in that instant. Everyone stared blankly at the divine hall that was growing, as it rose into the sky. No one paid any more attention to the water that had suddenly risen. The divine hall was 1,000 meters long and several hundred meters tall. The craftsmanship was exquisite and perfect. It seemed like a flawless piece of art. The divine hall rose to an altitude of 10 kilometers before it stopped. It radiated with a pressure that spread out in all directions in a blanketing manner. All the energy of the world became docile before it. This alerted all the ancestors of the 8 clans, the experts of the Zaar family, and the people of the Radiant Saint Master Union. When they raised their heads and saw the thumb-sized divine hall that hovered in the air, they immediately became interested. Without any hesitation, they all shot into the air as fast as they could and made way to the divine hall. At the same time, many experts in various places of the continent sensed the divine hall as well. They all came out of seclusion and traveled toward the city of God. I never thought that there would be divine hall hidden at the bottom of Fragrance River. This is unbelievable, Jian Chen murmured to himself as he stared at the divine hall in the air. Afterward, he charged toward it with Yu Yu in his arms while He Yu and Hong Lian followed close behind. Quan Yukai stared at the divine hall in interest, as he said with marvel, "Looks like it's really true that there can never be anything too strange. I never thought that a house could fly and even fly so high. This sure has broadened my horizons today. Yang Ling, let's go up there and have a look." Quan Yukai and Yang Ling did not fall behind either, and they tailed Jian Chen into the sky. There were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters on the banks of the river. As such, even more Heaven Saint Masters took to the air as soon as Quan Yukai and Yang Ling followed Jian Chen. They used the energy of the world to levitate and created colorful lights that flickered in the sky. The sight was enchanting. Jian Chen arrived at the same altitude as the Divine Hall with Yu Yu. The two of them stared fixedly at it. The 4 words, Bright Moon Divine Hall, hung on a great big board above the main entrance. The appearance of the Divine Hall had raised quite a large commotion. Figures constantly flickered through the surroundings and saint rulers had already arrived at the main entrance. There were a few saint rulers from the Union and the Zaar family besides the ancestors of the 8 clans. The faces of all the saint rulers from the 8 clans were pale and haggard. Clearly, they still had not fully recovered from their self-mutilation earlier in the day. The Bright Moon Divine Hall. I never thought that it would actually be the Bright Moon Divine Hall, a cry rang out from nearby. An old man in simple robes stared at the bright Divine Hall as all the people from the Radiant Saint Master Union gathered behind him. To no surprise, the President and Grand Elder were present as well. When Jian Chen saw the old man, his eyes froze. He could not help but think back to the old man cleaning furniture. Jian Chen had initially met this man in the Radiant Saint Tower. At that time, the old man was still a mysterious expert that Jian Chen could not see through, but now, Jian Chen could clearly see the old man's strength. He was a 3rd heavenly layer Saint King that had just broken through. The President sighed deeply and said, "It's recorded that 50,000 years ago, Fairy Haoyu was possibly the most beautiful person in the world. She also possessed unprecedented, exceptional talent. She used just 2,000 years to reach the peak of Saint Emperor and was only a paper-thin margin away from surpassing Saint Emperor, but it is a pity. She failed to overcome this margin and was stuck there for over 7,000 years. In the end, she still failed to escape the limits of life and passed away in meditation helplessly and regretfully. It's really just a female way to say the gender-neutral immortal, except Haoyu here isn't really immortal because she passed away. This is why I stuck with fairy, albeit a translation I dislike. Also, Haoyu means bright moon, so the Divine Hall actually has the same name as the person. I used an English translation for the Divine Hall since it's more like a title, while the Haoyu in Fairy Haoyu is likely to be her name. It said that the cultivation method Fairy Haoyu used was extremely wondrous. It used the essence of moonlight. When cultivating at night, the whole process of absorption is clearly visible. It's a cultivation method that surpasses the saint tier, and anyone who uses it to cultivate will be able to improve at astonishing speeds, added the Grand Elder. It's indeed mentioned in the records like that, but it's a pity that only females can use the cultivation method, said the President. With that, Jian Chen's eyes immediately lit up. He seemed to beam slightly. At that moment, the surrounding space began to ripple violently. Space gates appeared one after another as Saint Kings stepped out with tremendous presences. They all stared at the Divine Hall, gasping uncontrollably. Jian Chen glances over all the Saint Kings, and he saw the people of the 10 Protector clans. Included was an expert from the Pure Heart Pavilion and one from the Changyang clan. However, Jian Chen did not know the name of the Changyang clan expert even though he had seen him before. I never thought that it would be the Bright Moon Divine Hall of the famed Fairy Haoyu from 50,000 years ago. It said that the Divine Hall was built from some wondrous crystals from the moon and that the fairies spent 1,000 years traversing to and fro collecting them. Not only is the Divine Hall extremely tough, it possesses moonlight force, said a knowledgeable expert from the 10 Protector clans as they marveled in wonder. Chapter 1041, Saint King Killing Formation, 1. More and more people gathered around the Bright Moon Divine Hall. Not only did quite a few Saint Kings come, a lot of Saint Rulers arrived as well. There was also some Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, who stood on a milky white light. A capital city of the continent was a place where experts gathered. Fragrance River was just outside the City of God, which was why many experts were drawn over immediately when the Divine Hall broke its seal. A few people with certain backgrounds even used secret techniques to communicate with the experts of their family and their powerful friends, informing them of the current events here. So this object is called a Divine Hall, something a saint emperor crafted. No wonder it's so wondrous and can fly to such a high place. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling arrived behind Jian Chen, as they marveled at the divine hall that shone with hazy light. The material of this divine hall really is extremely special. It can actually absorb moonlight and transform it into its own power. He Yu stared at the divine hall in wonder. Jian Chen's eyes froze when he heard that, and only after a period of close observation did he notice that the divine hall had indeed absorbed a sliver of moonlight from the night sky. The moonlight was so faint. If he did not look closely, he would not be able to sense it at all. A sliver of reminiscence appeared in Hong Lian's eyes as inherited memories flashed through her head. They're right. This bright moon divine hall is indeed created from special materials from the moon. There are records regarding this material in my inherited memories. Hong Lian paused and raised her head up toward the moon in the sky. This is because in the ancient times, a saint emperor of my divine phoenix clan flew off to the moon. However, she took much more time than Fairy Hao Yu, taking up 4,000 years for a round trip. Jian Chen immediately became astounded when he heard these words. He subconsciously looked toward the moon in the sky and sighed emotionally. I never thought that we would be so far away from the moon, that it would take 1,000, or even several thousand years for saint emperors to reach there. This is unbelievable. The moon is indeed a place that people rarely set foot upon. Even in the ancient times when there were the most saint emperors, very few people were willing to spend that much time to fly to the moon, because space gates cannot be created in outer space. The only way to the moon is by flying over slowly, said Hong Lian. The divine hall must possess the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. Although only females can use it, if you give it to those talented female clansmen once we take it back, their future accomplishments will be unlimited. The eyes of the experts from the Protector clans and a few saint kings of other organizations shone, as they stared at the divine hall with obvious greed. Even if you ignored the value of the material used to build the divine hall, just the cultivation method was enough to cause the people from the Protector clans to drool. This was a cultivation method that surpassed Saint Tier. Even the Protector clans that had existed since the ancient times did not have such a great cultivation method. At this moment, the people of the Protector clans began to move before everyone else. They either flew toward the divine hall themselves or with a few Saint Ruler juniors. Only the middle-aged man from the Pure Heart Pavilion remained still, as he was the only person who the divine hall did not tempt out of everyone present. The people of the Protector clans were like flares. As soon as they began to move, the saint kings from ancient families or other large organizations began to move as well. They quickly approached the divine hall. The saint rulers in the surroundings all hesitated, as they levitated in the air. Before the saint kings, they had nothing to contend against them as mere saint rulers. Even if they came across treasures, they would not be able to beat the saint kings to take it for themselves. Instead, they might even face life-threatening danger. However, not all the saint rulers feared death. After a while of hesitation, someone finally gave in to their expanding desires, as he flew toward the divine hall even with the dangers ahead. However, his actions deeply influenced other people, which immediately led to more and more saint rulers flying toward the divine hall. Even a few Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters followed behind them all. Quan Yukai, Yang Ling, it'll be dangerous inside. You two should stay outside and not take part, Jian Chen said to the two of them, before flying toward the divine hall with Yu Yu in his arms. He Yu and Hong Lian followed closely behind him. Sigh, looks like a fierce struggle is bound to happen. However, the new master of the divine hall seems to have already been secretly determined, said the Saint King of the Pure Heart Pavilion. He glanced at the nearby Jian Chen. When he saw He Yu behind him, an obvious sliver of fear appeared in his eyes. Afterward, he ripped open a space gate and left. He had no plans in interfering with the matter of this divine hall. The ancestors of the 8 clans all hung in the air with their pale faces. They stared deeply at the people who flew toward the divine hall as regret filled their faces. We're already heavily injured. We don't have the ability to take part in the struggle for the divine hall at all, so let's return, said a saint ruler of the 8 clans, before leaving first with a face full of regret. The other saint rulers all sighed inside. Then, they left dejectedly as well. They all returned to the city of God. Jian Shen arrived at the main entrance of the divine hall with the crowd. Yu Yu was still in his arms. He hid within the mass of people. Bang! 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 A few muffled sounds rang out from ahead. The people from the protector clans at the very front had already opened the closed door of the divine hall. The heavy, stone door slowly opened with a series of rumbles. Immediately, a cold stream of air surged wildly from within. It was almost bone-chilling and gave off a bleak feeling, which shocked everyone present. "This is Moonlight Force," called out a Saint King from among the people of the protector clans. Moonlight Force is not Saint Force, so it indeed possesses odd characteristics. No wonder Fairy Hao Yu became the most powerful Saint Emperor back then. It probably has a close connection to this unique Moonlight Force other than her own strength, someone suggested. All the people stepped on the floor made from the crystals of the moon, as they slowly made their way inside. After they passed through the main entrance, an extremely vast space appeared before them. In the center of the space stood a 100-meter-tall stone tablet. There were words clearly carved into it. "Saint Emperors and Saint Kings are forbidden from entering the Divine Hall, or you will be responsible for the consequences." All the Saint Kings revealed rather horrible expressions when they saw this simple message. Although the warning of the tablet seemed to be filled with confidence and arrogance, where it dared to even look down on Saint Emperor, none of the Saint King present dared to not keep the warning in mind. The owner of the Divine Hall was the Fairy Hao Yu. She had reached the peak of Saint Emperor after all, someone who was only inches away from surpassing Saint Emperor. On the other hand, the Saint Rulers and Heaven's Saint Masters all became excited. They were all ecstatic, as they internally praised the heavens for being fair. "I never thought that the Divine Hall would only allow people below Saint King to enter, barring the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors. Fairy Hao Yu must have set up a formation to deal with Saint Kings and Saint Emperors inside," a Saint King of an ancient clan said with an ugly expression. "Humph, it has been several tens of thousand years since Fairy Hao Yu's era. The formation must be far weaker than it was before." "Do we really need to fear with so many people?" shouted a blue-robed old man loudly and courageously. "Fairy Hao Yu may be the strongest Saint Emperor back then and possess terrifying strength, but wouldn't it become a joke if we were scared off just by some words on a tablet?" Another middle-aged man added. He showed no intentions of backing off. Chapter 1042, Saint King Killing Formation, 2, You're right. If so many people are frightened to the point where we would shy away just because of a tablet, would we still have any dignity to move around on the continent? I, Ji Yuanba, will be entering the Bright Moon Divine Hall no matter what today. I'd like to see the abilities of the former strongest Saint Emperor, Fairy Hao Yu, and how great they are. Can she use a mere Divine Hall to kill a Saint King? Said a burly, scar-faced, middle-aged man. All the Saint Kings reacted to these words. The fear in their eyes disappeared, and they became determined. They were not mindless. Since they were able to become Saint Kings, life and death situations had tempered each and every one of them. They had stepped over countless corpses and climbed out from mountains of bodies. How would they fear death? Also, Saint Kings were people who stood on the very apex of the continent, so they naturally had their pride. How could they bear with the fact that just some words scared them away? Looks like it's going to be quite entertaining here. At this moment, clear laughter rang out from behind. Another striking Saint King had entered the Divine Hall. He looked roughly 30 years old, and was extremely handsome. He possessed a scholarly elegance, where all his movements carried great grace. Beside him was a white-dressed, devastating beauty. Kara Liwei. Jian Shen became slightly stunned when he saw her. He had not thought that Kara Liwei had actually returned and would come back to the Divine Hall. Afterward, Jian Shen glanced toward the middle-aged man who stood beside her. His gaze immediately froze. He recognized this man as well. It was the ancestor of the Kara clan that he had met in the imperial palace of the Qinhuang kingdom back then. "Kara Lot, I thought you wouldn't come. I didn't think you'd actually bring the treasure of your clan as well," a heavy voice boomed from the crowd. An ordinary-looking, middle-aged man in tight robes spoke to the ancestor of the Kara clan. Kara laughed and said, "A divine hall has appeared. This is quite a matter on the continent, enough to make all the Saint Kings fight to the point of death for it. If I have enough luck, I can take the divine hall for myself, which will also benefit the clan greatly. Kazda Jianxiong, why would you think I wouldn't come when there's such a good opportunity?" The middle-aged man was the ancestor of the Kazda clan, which was one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Empire. Then, Kara looked toward Jian Chen and smiled. "I never thought that Brother Jian Chen would be here as well." "Fantastic. If Brother Jian Chen does not mind, I'm willing to travel with Brother Jian Chen, as well as let Liwei broaden her knowledge in the meantime." "Does Brother Jian Chen mind?" Kara Liwei had also discovered Jian Chen in the crowd. She could not help but think of what had happened earlier on the ferry, which caused her face to blush slightly. When she had left the ferry before, she had already left the city of God with the ancestor of the clan, but she never imagined that the Bright Moon Divine Hall would break out as soon as they arrived home. The great activity alarmed Kara, who forced her to come back with him. The Qinhuang Kingdom was a subsidiary of the Kara clan, while Jian Chen was an imperial protector of the Qinhuang Kingdom. As a result, he stood with the Kara clan. In other words, Jian Chen had no reason to turn down Kara-Lot's request. He agreed straightforwardly before beginning to talk to Kara-Lot. Kara Liwei also recovered her previous state. She arrived at Jian Chen's side with a beaming smile. Then, she chattered with Yu, as she held her hand. They got along well very quickly and giggled from time to time. "Xiangtian, I never thought that you're here as well. This is fantastic. We can travel together as great-grandson and great-grandfather, and I can use that time to introduce you to some matters of the Protector clan, so that you can have some understanding." The great elder of the Changyang clan also arrived beside Jian Chen. Although he was amiable, he stressed great-grandson and great-grandfather when he mentioned it. Jian Chen did not become particularly joyful when he saw this great-grandfather, whose name he did not even know. All he did was agree indifferently, before devoting his attention elsewhere. Jian Chen did not have any great impressions of the people within the Protector Changyang clan besides Changyang Zhu Yunshao and his wife. Deep within, he did not even accept the fact that he was a member of the Protector clan. The great elder from the Protector clan slightly furrowed his brows when he saw Jian Chen's indifferent attitude. He revealed a sliver of displeasure, but he did not say anything more. The people gathered within the divine hall slowly made their ways into the depths. However, some people seemed to have broadcasted the warning on the table, which caused the saint rulers and heaven saint masters who had initially decided not to take part to surge into the divine hall as well. The people within constantly increase. At the same time, the news of the divine hall and the warning of the tablet spread through the continent like wildfire. It made many experts green with greed as even more saint rulers and heaven saint master used various methods to make their way to the city of God from all directions. A great group of people was currently making their way into the depths of the divine hall in a bold fashion. A large number of heaven saint masters and a few saint rulers would enter every room and hall they passed. The group of people gradually dispersed. A few heaven saint masters and saint rulers ran off to find their own fortunes, while only the saint kings remained gathered together. They steadily advanced into the depth with a cautious and vigilant fashion. They ignored the surrounding rooms. "Brother Jian Chen, the most valuable thing here is the cultivation method fairy how you left behind, but treasures like that can only be obtained from the very depths of the hall. It definitely won't be outside," the ancestor of the Kara clan explained to Jian Chen. He passed on the experience and knowledge he had accumulated over several thousand years to Jian Chen, while Kazda Jianxiong would add in a few things from time to time as well. Their intentions for friendship were self-explanatory. The group of them arrived in a huge square where the ceiling was 100 meters above. A huge sculpture stood in the center of the place. It depicted a lady who seemed to be around 20 years of age. Her white clothes made her seem sacred, while her hair was draped on her shoulders. She was extremely pretty, like a goddess from beyond the heavens. She did not seem like an existence that would be present in a mortal realm. This sculpture is undoubtedly Fairy Hao Yu. Fairy Hao Yu sure is a lady worthy of being known as a fairy. She really does look like an otherworldly fairy. Fairy Hao Yu's talent is unprecedented, reaching the peak of Saint Emperor at such a young age. She became the strongest among the Saint Emperors, though it's a pity that she couldn't overcome the final obstacle and break through. She passed away like that. What a pity, what a pity. Many of the Saint Kings stared at the sculpture with mixed emotions, as they discussed. Various emotional sighs and sounds of regret mingled together to form a hubbub. Fairy Hao Yu sure is an unparalleled beauty. Jian Chen stared at the sculpture in a daze as well, as he murmured. Fairy Hao Yu's beauty had completely exceeded the level where it could be praised as devastating. Only the heavenly Enchantress could be compared to her out of all the people he had met. At this moment, something suddenly happened. An extremely dense killing intent suddenly appeared, which filled the entire divine hall. It was bone-chillingly cold, and as soon as it appeared, it invaded the bodies of Saint Kings, worming its way into their bone marrow. It seemed to have frozen the center of their bones, and even Jian Chen was unable to avoid it. All the Saint Kings present revealed extremely horrible expressions. Afterward, surging saint force gushed out from within their bodies in an attempt to resist the invasion of the chilling killing intent. Chapter 1043, Saint King Killing Formation, 3. In a grand fashion, terrifying, surging energy erupted in the square within the divine hall. The energies from all the Saint Kings coiled together and immediately transformed into an extremely great force that flooded the surroundings. It knocked all the Saint Rulers and people below Saint Rulers far away. The Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were affected especially heavily. They all vomited blood as they flew backward. They were all heavily injured, while the fragile Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters had suffered even worse injuries. Jian Chen, He Yu, Hong Lian, Kara Lot, Kazda Jianxiong, and the great elder of the Protector Changyang clan gathered together. They all knew Yu Yu and Jian Chen's relationship, so they all worked together without explicit communication to create an energy barrier around Yu Yu and Kara Liwei, which prevented the two of them from being harmed in any way. This should be a method Fairy Hao Yu left behind to deal with Saint Kings in particular. Get the two of them far away from us first, so that we can move without worry. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for us to take care of them once we come across true danger, growled the great elder of the Changyang clan. Brother Jian Chen, what do you think? Kara Lot looked toward Jian Chen. Sure. Jian Chen hesitated slightly, before directly striking the protective barrier around Yu Yu and Kara Liwei. He knocked the two of them far away. The killing intent here is rapidly becoming stronger. If it continues like this, probably even Saint Kings at great perfection will struggle to resist it. This killing intent is odd. It's not purely killing intent. There seems to be something else within it. Once it invades our bodies, it'll wreak havoc like maggots in the bone. Let's advance faster and pass through this region, everyone called out. Afterward, they all used their surrounding saint force to resist the invasion of the killing intent. They continued toward the depths of the divine hall step by step. However, the deeper they traveled, the denser the killing intent became. Some first heavenly layer Saint Kings even began to struggle with resisting the killing intent. Jian Chen did not emit energy like everyone else. He created a protective barrier on the surface on his body to resist the killing intent and expanded the chaotic force within him to fill every inch. He completely utilized the advantages of the chaotic body, which made resistance even easier. The weird killing intent permeating the divine hall could not break through his body's defenses at all. Jian Chen looked around at the others, and a sliver of suspicion appeared on his face. Even Saint Kings found it rather difficult to resist this killing intent, let alone Saint Rulers. If Saint Rulers had entered this region, they would definitely fail to resist the invasion of the killing intent and die. They would not be able to pass through the place, so why did Fairy Hao Yu leave such a warning on the tablet? Perhaps Fairy Hao Yu just didn't want the divine hall she spent so much effort into crafting to fall into the hands of others, which was why she cast down this killing formation here to prevent the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors. And that it's not that those below Saint King can enter the divine hall safely, but their strength is just too weak, so they do not catch the fairy's attention? Maybe that was why she did not explain it on the tablet. Jian Chen analyzed inside. He already began to doubt whether everyone had misinterpreted the tablet. If the killing formation did not affect those below Saint King, why would he be faced with the attacks of such a powerful killing intent? After all, his comprehension remained at the 7th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler. Only his prowess in battle reached the level of Saint King's. At this moment, a barrier silently appeared. It was extremely large and not a normal white. Instead, it was a silvery moonlight condensed from moonlight force. It filled the entire hall and enveloped Jian Chen's group as well as the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters behind. Moonlight force immediately began to surge within the barrier. It condensed into countless sword chi that fell like rain that traveled toward all the people within the area with unbelievable speed. This included the Saint Rulers, Heaven Saint Masters, and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. With this, Yu, Liwei, and the other experts all changed drastically in expression. Despair filled the eyes of many people. This was an ability from a formation a Saint Emperor cast down, so its strength was self-evident. How could they resist it? Crap. Jian Chen's expression changed drastically. He used the illusory flash and shot toward Yu at his greatest speed. At the same time, the Saint artifact shot out from the center of his eyebrows and transformed into a huge golden tower in the blink of an eye. It shot toward Yu and wanted to approach her. Then, it could suck her into the artifact space. If the Saint artifact wanted to suck away someone, it needed to be within a suitable proximity. However, the Moonlight Force sword chi were just too fast, much faster than Jian Chen and the Saint artifact. Before they could even approach Yu, the sword chi had struck. Yuer! Jian Chen cried out. He was utterly enraged and filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have sucked Yu into the artifact space long ago. At the same time, Jian Chen shook violently. Over 10 sword chi had struck him at the same time, but they were only as strong as attacks from Saint Kings of the first heavenly layer. It could not break through the defense of his chaotic body, so they splattered apart like eggs as soon as they struck him. They recondensed into moonlight force and did not disperse. Jian Chen also arrived beside Yu. However, just when he wanted to send her into the artifact space, he suddenly became stunned. He stared blankly at Yu as disbelief flooded her face. Yu stood there with panic in her eyes, yet she was completely fine. She was unharmed. You are fine? Jian Chen asked in surprise. He had personally experienced the power of the sword chi and every single one of them was as powerful as a strike from a first heavenly layer Saint King. An attack like that was extremely fatal to someone with Yu's level of strength. Liwei also stood there, still badly shaken. She could not help but break into laughter when she saw just how much concern Jian Chen had for Yu. She patted her chest and said, Yang Yutian, I never thought that you'd care for your fiancé so much. Don't worry, we're fine. Yu warmed up inside when she saw Jian Chen's expression. She smiled sweetly and said, Jian Chen, don't worry. I'm fine. The sword chi from before doesn't seem to be able to harm us. Remember the warning on the tablet? These attacks won't affect anyone below Saint King. Jian Chen looked around and realized that everyone weaker than Saint King remained unharmed. Other than a few people injured from the eruption of energy from the Saint Kings, no one else suffered any injuries. Jian Chen came to a realization when he saw this. The warning on the tablet was indeed true. The formations within the Bright Moon Divine Hall indeed could not injure people below Saint King. Although he was still technically a Saint Ruler, he could display the strength of Saint Kings, which was why the formations recognized him as a Saint King. Jian Chen, be careful. The sword chi has condensed again, Yu warned. Jian Chen paid no attention to the sword chi. The 30-meter-tall Saint artifact floated above him. Then, he said to the two of them, do you two want to enter the Saint artifact? Jian Chen, it's not like we'll be harmed if we stay here, so why don't we stay outside? I've never witnessed such a major matter before. Yu turned down Jian Chen's suggestion. Jianshan hesitated slightly on that, but he still agreed with Yu Yu in the end. He did not force Yu Yu into the artifact space, but he did hand the saint artifact over to Yu Yu. He secretly ordered the artifact spirit to immediately suck the two of them away once they faced danger. The sword chi condensed from moonlight force once again and shot toward everyone like a blanket. All the Saint Kings used various abilities to resist the sword chi attacks. As Jian Shen had the chaotic body, he was able to resist against attacks from third heavenly layer Saint Kings. Unless they reached the fourth heavenly layer, they would not be able to break through his body at all, which was why he had it the easiest out of everyone present. However, Jian Shen could clearly feel that the attack this time was much more powerful than before after the densely packed sword chi struck him. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. Sword chi had struck a first heavenly layer Saint King, and tremendous energy began to float unceasingly from within his body. All of it dispersed in the divine hall in the end. Shit, this bloody moonlight force is devouring my energy, the person cried out in horror. He began to panic. The complexions of all the Saint Kings present changed, becoming extremely horrible. Chapter 1044, Saint King Killing Formation, 4. The Saint Force within that first heavenly layer Saint King leaked out rapidly and floated out into the moonlight barrier. It was refined into moonlight force very quickly, which strengthened the barrier. This can't continue. The more Saint Force you radiate, the stronger the barrier becomes. You need to leave here as soon as possible, called out a great elder of a protector clan. If all of your Saint Force gets devoured, you won't be able to leave even if you are a Saint King. You better leave quickly while you still have some remaining energy, someone within the crowd tried to persuade him. If the Saint Force continued to be refined into moonlight force, it would be extremely detrimental to everyone. The Saint King's complexion had already become the color of moonlight, extremely pale. Under everyone's insistence, he hesitated slightly before he stood up in a trembling fashion. He made his way toward the barrier with a face filled with unwillingness and regret, as he poured all his energy into suppressing the moonlight force within him, in an attempt to reduce the speed at that his Saint Force got devoured. He made his way to the barrier very quickly, but just when he wanted to leave, the barrier obstructed him. Duh! The Saint King immediately roared out, as he struck the barrier as hard as he could with the curved blade in his hand. However, the barrier did not even end up trembling. The moonlight force in the sky began to condense once more into densely packed sword chi. It radiated with a great pressure that flooded the divine hall. At the same time, the odd killing intent that invaded their bodies appeared again, and it actually merged into the sword chi strand by strand. It powered up the sword chi. The second heavenly layer. The attacks this time are as powerful as a second heavenly layer Saint King, a Saint King warned the crowd. As soon as he finished his words, the sword chi began to fall and blanketed down on everyone. Jianshan stood straight where he was, unmoving like a mountain. He allowed the sword chi to strike his body, which had turned his clothes to shreds long ago. His body became littered with white marks that were all due to the sword chi. Another few miserable shrieks rang out. The sword chi was just too tightly packed, so it injured a few more weaker Saint Kings. Weird moonlight force was deposited into their bodies, as it began to devour their Saint Force. From afar, a group of Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters stared at this in surprise. In their eyes, Saint Kings were supreme existences, people who stood at the apex. They held illustrious statuses and received the admiration of everyone. Many of them found it quite difficult to believe now that so many Saint Kings had fallen into such horrible shapes. After all, it was the first time for many of the Heaven Saint Masters and a few of the Saint Rulers who had entered the Divine Hall to see a Saint King. The sword chi is constantly becoming stronger. If this continues, it'll become strong to the point where we can't resist it very soon. We can't just sit and wait for that to happen. We need to break through the barrier as soon as possible, called out a Saint King. Immediately, around a dozen Saint Kings drew their saint weapons. Tremendous Saint Force surged wildly within the barrier, before striking the barrier at the same time. Boom! Terrifying energy ripples pushed the Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers backward, while the fragile Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters suffered quite some heavy damage. However, Yu and Kara Liwei did not sustain any damage, as they had the protection of the Saint Artifact. After taking on the combined attack from more than 10 Saint Kings, the barrier immediately began to shake violently. However, it did not shatter. What a powerful barrier, a Saint King could not help but exclaim. He became much sterner. The Saint Rulers and people below Saint Ruler backed off some more, as they almost stuck to the barrier. All the injured Heaven Saint Masters sat with their legs crossed, as they healed their wounds. Meanwhile, a milky white light surrounded the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. They were using Radiant Saint Force to heal their wounds. The moonlight force within the barrier immediately began to churn after the barrier resisted the combined attack from the Saint Kings. It condensed into densely packed sword chi in the sky once more, though there were much fewer than before. However, its power had drastically increased. Swish. 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 With a series of ear-piercing sounds, the sword chi rained upon them with unbelievable speed. Although the number had lessened, it was still like a blanket. No one could dodge it, so they were only able to forcefully resist it. After the wave of attacks, the sword chi struck 3 more Saint Kings. Although their wounds were not life-threatening, the moonlight force was extremely weird. The residue in their bodies began to devour their Saint Force. Regardless of how hard they tried, they could not purge it, which forced them to devote all their power into resisting it and slowing down the dissipation of their Saint Force. This wave of sword chi has already reached the 3rd heavenly layer. If it continues like this, the next wave should be at the 4th heavenly layer, and then the 5th, the 6th, and so on. It'll go on forever, until all of us die here. If we let that happen, we will all die. No one will be able to survive. Everyone, do not hold back. Strike the barrier with all your strength. The speakers were 2 ancestors from ancient clans. This time, everyone decided to contribute. They gathered all their power to strike at the same time, and they sent an earth-shaking attack at the barrier. Jian Shen had also drawn his emperor armament and struck the barrier as soon as he could. Resisting this wave of attacks was already the limits of his chaotic body. If he did not break through the barrier, the next wave would be able to pierce his body. Although he had no idea if the moonlight force could devour his chaotic force, it was not something he wanted to risk. Boom! The combined attacks of all the Saint Kings finally broke through the extremely tough barrier, reducing it into dense strands of moonlight force that floated around the Divine Hall. Everyone would not help but smile slightly in relief now that they had destroyed the barrier. However, before long, a cold voice boomed out in the empty space. Those who have not heeded the warning, take responsibility for your actions. With that, streaks of bright and pure moonlight suddenly appeared. It shone blindingly like sunlight as 9 balls of light floated above the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu in the center of the area. Each ball of light shone with bright moonlight. From afar, it seemed like 9 small moons. Rumble. The Divine Hall began to shake violently. One of the moons that floated above the sculpture suddenly began to enlarge and shine with dazzling light. Everyone could not help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes once more, the scene before them had already completely changed. The familiar Divine Hall had disappeared and a desolate land now replaced it. There was nothing as far as the eye could see except for dry earth. All the Saint Kings changed in expression when they saw this. They had all realized that they had fallen into another formation. Everyone had fallen into it, including the 1st heavenly layer Saint King who was injured at the very start. It could be said that all the Saint Kings that had entered the Divine Hall had gathered in this formation once more. Is this landscape the moon? The great elder from the Changyang clan looked around in interest, as he said with surprise and suspicion. It doesn't matter if this landscape is the moon or not. We need to break out as soon as possible, as it definitely can't be safe. And that sudden voice back then, was that Fairy Hao Yu's voice? A great elder from the Yuan sect said with a sunken face. Uneasiness filled his eyes. Many people could not but change an expression when they heard that, but someone rebuked very quickly. Fairy Hao Yu passed away in meditation several tens of thousand years ago, so it's impossible for her to still be alive. She must have left behind that voice back then. At this moment, a mysterious suction silently appeared. It gathered around the people and slowly pulled out their saint force. Everyone immediately changed in expression. They all sat down quickly and poured all their strength into resisting the suction. However, they failed to stop the expansion of their saint force no matter how hard they tried. Jianshan also felt the weird, mysterious force gathering around him, as if it was drawing the chaotic force within him outward. His chaotic force also began to show signs of movement, as if it had broken free of his control and was drifting outward. However, chaotic force could not be compared to saint force in the end. Under Jian Chen's control, the chaotic force immediately calmed down and did not expand outward like the saint force of the Saint Kings. What a weird formation and force. I actually can't prevent the energy within me from expanding. If that's the case, let me break through this formation. I'd like to see if it can resist a strike from me. Yu raised his head and his gaze sharpened. A slivery white machete appeared in his right hand, radiating with a chilling pressure. It was a weapon with origin energy. Just with that weapon, Yu could deal attacks as strong as Saint Emperors and fight hand in hand with them. At the very top of the Divine Hall, there was an extremely pretty and illusory woman that currently sat on a pure white piece of jade within a completely sealed room. Her eyes were closed, but suddenly, she became surprised. Her eyes snapped open, and she cried out involuntarily, "Origin energy! This is origin energy! How is this possible? How can origin energy exist in this world? Wasn't all the origin energy sealed up in the distant void of space? How can this energy exist here?" The illusory woman stood up from the piece of jade, and her emotions began to churn. She was not calm in any way, and even excitement seemed to have appeared on her illusory face. Chapter 1045, Saint King Killing Formation, 5. Yu shot into the sky with his origin energy machete, and he chopped at the sky with lightning speed. A magnificent ray appeared. It shot through the sky as if it could destroy the surroundings and immediately caused the space of the formation to violently tremble. Yu's machete had not even struck the formation, yet it had suffered great disruptions and showed signs of breaking apart. All the Saint Kings trapped in the formation stared unblinkingly at Yu. Their faces burned with greed and hope. There was no one present that Yu's powerful origin energy weapon did not tempt, but none of them had the courage to try and steal it. He has finally personally moved. How can this mere formation stop us, since he's someone who can even go up against Saint Emperors? All the Saint Kings who knew Yu's strength showed expression of relief. None of them believed the formation could withstand Yu's attack, as it was just too mighty. They all shivered inside just by standing to one side. At the same time, the illusory woman's eyes immediately lit up in the sealed room at the top of the Divine Hall. She said, "How can you people break through the illusory formation of 9 moons I personally cast down? I may not be able to use the full strength of the formation due to the limitations of my strength, but it's still not something Saint Emperors can break through. Even experts in the origin realm will need to expend a great effort to break through it. 9 moons as one." The woman formed a seal with her hands, which constantly changed before her chest. Immediately, the 8 other smaller moons that floated above the sculpture fused with the first moon and completely became one. All the people below Saint King stood blankly afar, as they watched everything unfold. To them, they had completely lost sight of the Saint Kings. An extremely huge moon stood in the previous location of the Saint Kings. It seemed extremely like the moon, illuminating the entire area with moonlight. The moon originated from the formation, which was extremely profound. The area within the formation was an independent space that trapped all the Saint Kings. Within the formation space, Yu's machete viciously struck the barrier of the formation. However, now that the 9 moons had fused as one, the formation's power had greatly increased. It was nowhere as weak as before, so Yu's attack on the level of Saint Emperors could only cause it to tremble gently after he struck. It stabilized very soon and did not shatter. This is impossible. All of the hopeful Saint Kings changed in expression when they witnessed this, as they immediately cried out. Disbelief filled all of them. This clearly stunned Yu as well. He lowered his head to look at his machete as disbelief clouded his eyes. The formation has suddenly become much more powerful. With its current strength, probably even Saint Emperors will struggle to break through it, Hong Lian said from beside Jian Chen. Her eyes had already become red, as if 2 balls of flames burned inside. She was using a secret technique to observe the formation. Crap. The formation has strengthened greatly, and the energy within me is leaking out at a great speed, someone cried out. All the Saint Kings present bathed in a thick layer of Saint Force, as their energy leaked from their bodies at a rate several dozen times faster than before. Then, their Saint Force dispersed in the surroundings. The mysterious suction force present in the formation space drew it out. Yu and Hong Lian were not spared from it either. No one could stop it. Jian Chen's complexion also became rather horrible. Now that the suction force had grown, the chaotic force that he had just stabilized began to lose control again. Strands of it flowed outward uncontrollably, except it was nowhere near as fast as the Saint Force in the Saint Kings. Strands of weak, gray energy appeared around Jian Chen. An aura of destruction filled it, which was extremely different from the energies within the other Saint Kings. All the Saint Kings naturally detected Jian Chen's chaotic force, but no one paid attention to the unique chaotic force, as they were struggling just for themselves. A sliver of panic appeared in Jian Chen's eyes. Chaotic force was extremely difficult to replenish. He could not afford an overconsumption of chaotic force. Suddenly, Jian Chen roared at the sky. His eyes shone, as he poured all his strength into controlling the chaotic force. It immediately stopped flowing outward under his control, and the chaotic force around him also began to approach him bit by bit. It eventually returned into his body in the end. Odd. Just what is this power? I can clearly feel the greatness of this power, but why have I never seen it before? The illusory woman murmured in the room at the very top of the divine hall. She furrowed her brows in thought. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something. Her eyes immediately lit up, and disbelief filled her face. She said, I remember my father once mentioned a powerful energy called chaotic force. Why does the characteristics of this energy match up with the chaotic force my father mentioned? Is this chaotic force? However, the woman suddenly shook her head. Impossible. How can chaotic force appear in this world? Isn't this a great power that only people in that world can cultivate? Chapter 1046, Fight for the Divine Hall, 1. Xiaobai wants to take the Saint Artifact in. If that was possible, it could store Jian Chen and the others into the artifact. Then, it can bring them out. It's a pity that the Saint Artifact can't enter, Yu murmured softly. She had understood the White Tiger's intentions very quickly. The Saint Artifact spun, as it shone with a hazy golden light by the side of the formation, before returning to the air above Yu. It needed to keep Yu safe. In the formation space, the White Tiger opened its mouth. It knew that the Saint Artifact did not enter the formation with it, and it immediately growled at the formation. It seemed to be filled with frustration. Jian Chen understood the familiar White Tiger's intentions at first thought after he saw its behavior. He said, Xiaobai, the formation that traps us is just too powerful. We can't break it even when we all work together. All we can do now is wait for someone outside to gain control of the Divine Hall, which will allow them to control the Divine Hall as well. Immediately take Yu and Kara Liwei into the depths of the Divine Hall, to the control center. The White Tiger looked at Jian Chen, as he worked hard to control his chaotic force, and worry appeared in its eyes. Afterward, it produced a deep growl, as if it had agreed to Jian Chen's instructions. Xiaobai, tell the artifact spirit after you get out to not let Senior Roy Jin out no matter what. Keep him in the artifact space, until you leave the Divine Hall. Also, Xia Wang, who followed me in the Sea Realm, is still cultivating inside the artifact space. Get the artifact spirit to contact him and get him to protect you all as you venture into the depths. Jian Shen gave a long list of orders to the White Tiger. Whether the people trapped in the formation could leave would completely depend on the people outside. If they failed, all the Saint Kings inside would die. The White Tiger left the artifact space with Jian Chen's words. It arrived outside and recounted everything that Jian Chen had said, word by word, to the artifact spirit. Although the White Tiger could not speak human tongue, the artifact spirit could understand him since he was a spirit. He immediately informed Yu Yu and Kara Liwei of Jian Chen's current situation. Yu Yu immediately paled when she learned that Jian Chen was currently in danger. Her face was filled with anxiety and deep worry, as she lost her normal composure. Kara Liwei was also anxious, but she tried as hard as she could to keep her composure. She comforted Yu Yu, "Sister Yu Yu, don't worry. Don't we still have ways to save Jian Chen? As long as we find the control center of the Divine Hall, we'll be able to save Jian Chen without him suffering any harm at all." Yu Yu tightly clenched her jade-like hands. Her palms were sweaty. Although there was still a way for them to save Jian Chen, how were they supposed to pass through the many obstacles of the Divine Hall to reach the control center with these brutal saint rulers? The White Tiger had already entered the saint artifact and told Ruo Jin about what had happened outside. Ruo Jin was still currently filling the 3 flaming Jadites with energy. Immediately, he stopped what he was doing when he learned about what was happening outside, and he furrowed his brows. "Ruo Jin, there's only one way to save Master, and that's to get the mistress to gain control over the Divine Hall and shut down the formation. Master plans to call a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler from the sea race to go out and assist mistress in controlling the Divine Hall, but I just don't trust this person. Once he leaves the artifact space, I can't do anything to him either. I've come to you especially this time to leave a restriction within that person, just in case," the artifact spirit said to Ruo Jin. Ruo Jin agreed without any extra thought. "There are many secret techniques of my dragon clan, and there are quite a few among them for controlling people. Bring that sea race person over." Xia Wang was currently in seclusion, as he practiced the Octoterra Emperor's cultivation method. The artifact spirit forcefully roused him and sent him to Ruo Jin's side. "Xia Wang, Master has orders for you to immediately leave this space and assist the mistress in taking this Divine Hall. However, to prevent you from going overboard in some areas, we need to leave a restriction within you. As long as you focus on assisting the mistress, nothing will happen to you," the artifact summarized. He explained the task as well as the rough situation outside to Xia Wang, so that he could have some understanding. Xia Wang's eyes immediately lit up when he heard about the Bright Moon Divine Hall. He understood the power of Divine Halls extremely well, and knew that once someone possessed a Divine Hall, they could go up against 16th star experts. No one could threaten the owner of the Divine Hall in any way given that they did not come across emperors. Although the Bright Moon Divine Hall tempted Xia Wang, he dismissed these thoughts very quickly and calmed down. He still remembers his current situation, so he forcefully suppressed his itching desire. He said, "Don't worry. I, Xia Wang, am not a person who returns kindness with animosity. Since Jian Shen gave me the invaluable cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor without even hesitating, I will never do anything that betrays Jian Shen in this life. If I do, I am willing to suffer the punishment of utter annihilation," Xia Wang said righteously. His tone was extremely resolute. "Just in case, I will be leaving a restriction within you. If you really do something unaccounted for, I will wipe out your soul in an instant. I will personally remove it after you've accomplished your task." Ruo Jin stared at Xia Wang with bright eyes. Although Xia Wang had never seen Ruo Jin before, Ruo Jin was definitely someone that belonged on Jian Chen's side since he could appear here. He could even vaguely feel a pressure that made him shiver, which allowed him to know that the middle-aged man before him was definitely a powerful and terrifying expert. Xia Wang did not show any resistance toward Ruo Jin's intentions of planting a restriction within him. He accepted it calmly, as he had no other choice. Afterward, Ruo Jin planted a restriction on Xia Wang's soul through a secret technique of the Dragon Clan. Xia Wang's life was basically in Ruo Jin's hand with the restriction, as Rui Jin only needed a single thought to wipe out Xia Wang's soul if he did anything unexpected. Xia Wang and the white tiger left the artifact space together and appeared beside Yu Yu. Yu Yu had already learned of Xia Wang's identity in detail from the artifact spirit, so she did not become surprised when she saw him. She only observed him curiously, as this was her first time meeting a member of the sea race. Is this Jian Chen's woman? I never thought that her strength would be this bad. Xia Wang observed Yu Yu curiously as well, and he immediately felt a sliver of surprise when he saw her strength. Yu Yu greets Senior Xia Wang. I shall be in your care. Yu Yu greeted Xia Wang politely with a bow and did not refer to him in the casual fashion that Jian Chen did. Xia Wang gained a good impression of Yu Yu with how she behaved. He laughed aloud and said, You're Jian Chen's woman, so you're not an outsider anyway. There's no need for us to be so polite, so just spare the terms of seniority. Just call me Xia Wang. Xia Wang and Yu Yu spoke some more, before focusing on the main problem. Afterward, they left for the depths of the Divine Hall with the White Tiger and Kara Liwei. Quite a few Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters had already entered the depths before them when Yu Yu's group had left. There were also some Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters who had given up on that idea and directly backed out of the Divine Hall. They spread the news of all the trapped Saint Kings in the Divine Hall at the same time. There were still quite a lot of people floating in the cool night sky outside the Divine Hall. This included the people from the Radiant Saint Master, such as the President and the Grand Elder. As Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters, they did not enter the Divine Hall. Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters enjoyed exalted statuses on the Tian Yuan continent, which were in no shape or form below Saint Kings. Also, they never took part in any of the killings and battles on the continent, so the Bright Moon Divine Hall did not possess any great use to them. They did not have the need at all to risk their lives and compete for the Divine Hall. What? All the Saint Kings that entered have been trapped. The people from the Union and the other people in the crowd all changed in expressions when they heard this news. They all felt rather perturbed, as the fear in their gazes toward the Divine Hall deepened. The formation of the Divine Hall only targets Saint Kings and those beyond Saint King. Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers are resistant to the attacks of the Divine Hall, a Heaven Saint Master who had exited said loudly. With that, the Saint King who had just hurried over through space gates and were about to enter the Divine Hall immediately halted. They became torn between surprise and suspicion. Suddenly, his eyes froze and he stared fixedly at the roof of the Divine Hall. A middle-aged man in white robes stood proudly at the highest point of the Divine Hall. No one knew exactly when he had appeared. The man seemed to have fused with the surrounding space, becoming a part of the surroundings. No one actually discovered him, as he stood in such a brazen fashion on top of the Divine Hall other than the Saint King. He seemed to be transparent, which made it extremely easy for people to miss him. The Path Lord of Carnal Desires. The Saint King recognized the man at first glance, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. In that moment, the evil-looking face of the Path Lord was rather pale. He stood rather haggardly on the top of the Divine Hall, as he mumbled to himself, "Fairy, how you sure is extravagant to collect material from the moon to build such a powerful Divine Hall. The moonlight force within this Divine Hall is weird and powerful. Also, the toughness of the Divine Hall cannot be compared with any ordinary Divine Hall. Even if I want to break through it, it'll be extremely difficult. It's a pity that the origin energy injured me last time. Origin energy is just too powerful. I can't recover in such a short amount of time, and my strength is greatly reduced. Otherwise, I'd like to see what fairy how you had prepared all those years ago in the Divine Hall," the Path Lord said with some regret. Afterward, he vanished. Chapter 1047, Fight for the Divine Hall, 2. As the news of how the Bright Moon Divine Hall prohibited the entry of Saint Kings broke out, all the Saint Rulers and some Heaven Saint Masters could no longer resist their teeming desires. They all excitedly charged into the Divine Hall. Since all the Saint Kings within the Divine Hall were now trapped, they were the most powerful people as Saint Rulers. This reignited the flames of hope within these Saint Rulers, as if the bright moon divine hall was now just right before them, waiting for them to take it. As these people entered, the number of people within the divine hall constantly increased. There were people as powerful as the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler, and people as weak as newly broken through heaven's Saint Masters. Half of the Saint Rulers from the Radiant Saint Master Union had entered the divine hall as well. However, none of the Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters entered. Instead, they all remained outside and waited. They did not leave though, as they wanted to anticipate the person that the divine hall ended up with in the end. Yu and Kara Liwei made their way toward the depths of the divine hall under the protection of Xia Wang and the White Tiger. The palm-sized saint artifact followed behind them closely and remained above Yu's head at all times. On the highest floor of the divine hall, the illusory woman remained seated on the pure white piece of jade with her eyes closed. Everything that went on in the divine hall was under her control. The woman slowly opened her eyes. She appeared to be in thought, as she mumbled, "Originally, I wanted to attract some geniuses in here so I could take their bodies. Then, I can cultivate from the start again, but it seems like there is no need to do that at all with the look of things right now. There's already an even better option. That works as well. The origin energy in this world has been sealed up. Even if I take a body for myself, I won't be able to break through Saint Emperor and reach the origin realm. However, the chaotic body is not similarly limited. However, who set down that formation in the distant outer space? Why did they seal up origin energy? It's a pity that the formation is just too powerful. I can't break through it at all, or how would how you, end up in a state like this? The layout of the divine hall was extremely complicated. Hallways intersected again and again, which made it extremely easy for people to get lost. It was like a maze. Yu and the others became lost very quickly. They traveled recklessly through the intersecting hallways and the tunnels that would appear from time to time. They hoped that they could find the correct way. They had tried leaving down marks in places where they had traveled through, but it was impossible to leave a mark anywhere within the divine hall. It all depended on luck whether they could make it out or not. They would come across a few heaven saint masters and saint rulers from time to time, as they made their way through the maze-like hallways, but no conflict ensured. There would also be some saint rulers who wanted to join Yu's party, but they were all turned down. They had been trapped within here for 3 whole days before they finally found the correct way out. They arrived on the 2nd floor, but did not come across any dangers during that time. It seemed like the divine hall did not possess dangers that targeted saint rulers and those below. In these 3 days, saint rulers and heaven saint masters constantly entered the divine hall from outside. The number of people within the divine hall grew to several thousand, though most of them were heaven saint masters. The news of the trapped saint kings had already spread to the 10 protector clans and various ancient clans, which immediately shocked them greatly. The protector clans viewed this with great importance. The saint kings immediately hurried from the protector clans. They stopped outside, as they discussed the methods to save them with their brows furrowed. Even saint kings from Mercenary City had personally come. Within the formation space of the divine hall, the trapped saint kings remained seated on the floor. All of them worked hard to suppress the leakage of their energy. Yu and Hong Lian both equipped their origin energy armors, which could drag it out a little even though it could not completely stop the leakage. A few weaker saint kings had already begun to pale. They trembled slightly, as they sat on the ground. They were clearly suffering quite a lot. The saint kings that the sword she had struck outside in particular had already powerlessly collapsed on the ground. Their eyes were dull and filled with despair, as their bodies had already lost all their energy. The loss of energy could not lead to them losing their level of cultivation. Even with all their energy gone, they could just replenish it outside, and they would return to how they were before without much time. However, saint kings without any of their energy were extremely weak. Particularly in this odd formation space, their abilities as saint kings had been restricted and they could not use spatial and world force, so it reduced them to ordinary people. Among all the people, the only person who did not have energy leaking out was Jian Chen. The power and uniqueness of chaotic force were just incomparable to ordinary energy. However, Jian Chen still needed to devote all his strength into suppressing it even though that was the case. I hope you can successfully obtain the Divine Hall, or all of us trapped here will just be waiting for our deaths, Jianchen prayed inside. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. During that time, countless people entered the Divine Hall, and people could be seen everywhere within it. However, most of them were Heaven Saint Masters. During that period of time, Yu's group had already passed through 8 floors of mazes and arrived on the 9th floor of the Divine Hall. Undoubtedly, the surface area of the 9th floor was much smaller than the floors below. It seemed more like an extremely large hall when gazing out. There were 9 huge stone pillars with simple carvings that held up the ceiling. Vague moonlight force revolved around each pillar and radiated with a tremendous pressure. The hall was beautifully decorated. All the stone tables, seats, and various ornaments were carved from the same type of jade. Every single item was extremely exquisite. It was impossible to estimate their value. A mighty but extravagant throne hovered in the air at the end of the hall. On the throne lay a 2-meter-long, exquisitely crafted scepter that shone with a moonlight haze. It was extremely pleasant to the eye. Yu's party were not the first people to arrive. Before them, various saint rulers and a few Heaven Saint Masters had already arrived. Although the hall was not packed, there were several hundred people that had already gathered at the very least. All of them stared at the staff on the throne with bright eyes, and no one made any noise. The atmosphere was extremely weird. Although the treasure was right before them, no one went ahead to take it. All the people who could arrive here were very clever. They knew that the first person to go up for the treasure would be the first one to suffer from all the attacks of the people present. Even 9th heavenly layer saint rulers would struggle greatly to leave with their lives intact. That staff definitely is not so simple. It might be hiding some secret. You never know. And that throne is not your ordinary, everyday object either. Xia Wang stared unblinkingly at the throne, as he said with a soft voice. Roar. The white tiger narrowed its eyes, as they shone with a threatening light. It immediately took a leap and turned into a blur that shot toward the throne. It viewed the several hundred saint rulers and Heaven Saint Master that had gathered as nothing. Xia Wang did not charge up with him. Instead, he remained close to Yu and Kara Liwei to protect him. He kept loyal to his task, to protect the two of them. That's the winged tiger god. The winged tiger god wants to take the scepter. Quick, stop it. The scepter must hide the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. It might even be the object that can directly control the Divine Hall. We can't let the winged tiger god obtain it. Whoever gains the scepter will be the one who controls the Divine Hall. The white tiger's actions shattered the odd atmosphere in the Divine Hall. At that moment, no one hesitated anymore, as they all charged toward the scepter at their top speeds. The white tiger at the very front also became the target of everyone's attacks, where more than 20 saint rulers sent powerful sword chi at it with a wave of their hands at the same time. Before the great temptation of the Divine Hall and the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu, they all lost their minds. The fact that the white tiger was the winged tiger god no longer bothered them. Chapter 1048, Fight for the Divine Hall, 3. Over 20 sword chi from saint rulers shot toward the white tiger, as they radiated with powerful ripples of energy. In order to stop the white tiger from getting close to the throne, none of the saint rulers held back. The white tiger's eyes remained fixed on the scepter. It did not even look at the sword chi behind it. When the sword chi almost struck, the white tiger abruptly began to enlarge and turned into a 10-meter-long white tiger in an instant. It unfurled its huge, white wings, while a great energy seemed to be secretly charging up. Whoosh! With the sound of a wild gust, the huge wings of the white tiger suddenly flapped backward. 2 huge whirlwinds immediately formed and quickly collided with the sword chi from behind. After it enlarged, the speed of the white tiger skyrocketed. It shot toward the scepter like an arrow, several times faster than before. The powerful sword chi collided with the whirlwinds the white tiger produced. With a muffled boom, the sword chi all shattered into pieces from the spinning wind, and the whirlwinds continued onward without dispersing after blocking the attacks. The whirlwinds obstructed the saint rulers that pursued behind the white tiger, which allowed it to approach the huge, hovering throne successfully. There was nothing protecting the throne, so the white tiger leaped onto it without coming across any obstructions. It gripped the scepter with its mouth, before returning along its previous route. It leaped in Yu Yu's direction in the form of a faint blur. The winged tiger god has taken the scepter. Quick, steal it back, Fairy Hao Yu's treasure is right before our eyes. Quickly stop the winged tiger god. Whoever who gets the scepter will be the one who obtains a fortuitous encounter. With the scepter taken, all the people immediately began to churn. There were a few people who were unwilling to see the scepter taken just like that before them. So, they fanned on everyone, as they stood on the ground. Everyone had become green with greed. In that moment, all the saint rulers within the hall began to move. They encircled the white tiger with extremely great teamwork and surrounded it from all directions. There were more than 10 saint weapons that shot through the air with powerful ripples of energy, chopping toward the huge body of the tiger with lightning speed. Accompanying them was another wave of over 20 sword chi. The attacks formed a shapeless net in the air that sealed out all routes of escape for the white tiger, as the attacks fell down like a blanket. The white tiger stopped mid-air awe-inspiringly. It looked around with a threatening light in its eyes, before throwing its head up. It tossed the scepter high up into the air, which allowed it to open its mouth and produce an earth-shaking roar. Immediately, visible sound waves quickly began to expand with the white tiger as the epicenter. The sound wave possessed an unimaginable force. When it collided with the saint weapons of the saint kings and the sword chi, all the sword chi dissipated, while the saint weapons in the hands of the saint rulers trembled violently. It seemed like an invisible force was stopping their advance, which not only made it extremely difficult for them to continue onward, but also forced them backward constantly. The sound wave expanded extremely quickly and covered the entire room very soon. It swept past everyone and immediately reduced all their clothes to shreds, forcing them into a horrible shape. Miserable cries rang through the entire room. The white tiger's roar possessed the might of a beast god, so it possessed a penetrative characteristic. It could injure the souls of people. The heaven saint masters all shrieked, as they clutched their heads painfully due to their weaker souls. Only saint rulers could endure it, but even for them, they showed signs of pain. It still affected their souls greatly. The white tiger's strength was not at the peak of Class 7, but it was a winged tiger god after all. It possessed inherited memories and could learn powerful abilities, while its battle prowess was shocking. Just the might of its roar was enough to shock many ninth heavenly layer saint rulers. The combined attacks from several dozen saint rulers collapsed from the roar. The white tiger did not continue to bother with them. It caught the scepter, as it fell down. Then, it bounded toward Yu Yu. Leave the scepter, or you won't be leaving today. The saint rulers recovered extremely quickly and courageously charged toward white tiger. All of them had lost their calm before the temptation. Their only desire was to obtain the scepter. In that moment, the white tiger had become the enemy of everyone. All the saint rulers took part in restricting the white tiger's movements, striking the white tiger without holding back at all. They were attempting to kill it. Afar, a few saint rulers even began to charge up their saint-tier battle skills. The white tiger seemed to be agitated as well. It growled deeply as dense killing intent flickered through its vicious eyes. It charged threateningly toward a few saint rulers that blocked its way, as it flapped its wings violently. It shot out powerful wind blades at them. The saint rulers all knew how powerful the winged tiger god was. They faced it as a powerful enemy. They swung their saint weapons as fast as they could, as they chopped at the wind blades. Boom! The wind blades and saint weapons collided, which immediately produced a powerful ripple of energy. The wind blades dispersed, while the powerful force of the collision and the wave of energy knocked back the saint rulers. They all quickly shot backward. At this moment, around a dozen saint rules that shot over from the sides approached the white tiger as well. All their saint weapons shone with a blinding light, as they chopped through the space. They were approaching the white tiger with lightning speed. The white tiger's fur began to glow with a hazy white light, as it blocked the full-powered attacks from the Saint Rulers with its wings. When the Saint weapons landed on the wings, all of the Saint Rulers felt like their lightning-fast attack had landed on soft cotton. The surging Saint force hidden within their Saint weapons completely disappeared in that moment. "Crap, its wings have absorbed the energy on our Saint weapons," a Saint Ruler cried out. He was filled with disbelief. After absorbing the energies from more than 10 Saint weapons, the wings no longer remained so white. A few extra colors appeared. However, in the next moment, the wings suddenly jolted, and the energy absorbed from the Saint weapons immediately poured out like a flood. It knocked all of the Saint Rulers that had approached far away. At this moment, a pressure that seemed to originate from the world suddenly appeared. It locked tightly onto the white tiger, which caused the space around the white tiger to thicken. "It's a Saint tier battle skill. Move away." Sensing the frightening pressure, all the Saint Rulers changed in expression and immediately moved far away from the white tiger. The white tiger slowly turned around. Its eyes locked onto the 3 Saint Rulers who were casting Saint tier battle skills. Once locked on, it was impossible to dodge or avoid the Saint tier battle skill. The white tiger could only face it head-on. Chapter 1049, Fight for the Divine Hall. 4. The 3 Saint Rulers who were casting the Saint tier battle skills all originated from ancient clans and belonged to the 9th heavenly layer. Their Saint tier battle skills were equivalent to attacks from Saint Kings with their current strengths. The other Saint Rules had kept the white tiger busy earlier, which provided the 3 Saint Rulers with enough time to charge up their battle skills. They had completed the charge up now, and the devastating power was about to erupt. A tremendous pressure that originated from the surroundings seemed to flood the entire hall, which caused everyone gathered in there to shiver. They all looked toward the 3 Saint Rulers with obvious fear and dread. The white tiger revealed a stern gaze once again. With its body as a beast god, it indeed had the power to look down on all the Saint Rulers, but the battle skills it currently faced was on the level of Saint Kings. That was enough to threaten it. It was already too late to stop the 3 Saint Rulers from casting the Saint tier battle skills. The white tiger quickly began to swipe the space before it with its front paws. With every swipe, a tiny ripple would appear. Saint tier battle skill. Heaven-cleaving sword. Saint tier battle skill. Swing beyond samsara. Saint tier battle skill. Divine fist of the 6th paths. With 3 bellows, the Saint Rulers simultaneously cast their battle skills after their long charge up. The first person lifted his sword over his head and swung out in the air. They produced a blinding sword chi that shot toward the white tiger with an unstoppable force. The curved blade in the second person's hand followed an extremely profound trajectory. A vague ripple immediately appeared, and it quickly spread toward the white tiger. Wherever it passed, space would shake violently and become blurry. Although it did not really seem like anything, it possessed terrifying might. A layer of extremely dense energy coated the third person's fist. The fist seemed to move slowly, but it was flung out with exceedingly great speed. His entire right hand disappeared as he punched out. It was like it had completely fused with the surrounding space and entered another dimension. However, in the next moment, 6 huge fists, completely condensed from energy, appeared above the white tiger's head. They all spun and revolved in a circle with one another, as each fist radiated with a terrifying aura. The paws of the white tiger swiped faster and faster. Slowly, it drew an extremely complicated image in the air. It was blurry, but it radiated with a profound aura. Each line and image seemed to contain the laws of the world. This was a defensive technique that originated from the white tiger's inherited memories. This was its first time it had used it. As soon as the formation appeared, it expanded before the white tiger. Boom! The heaven-cleaving sword struck the formation viciously and caused it to violently shake. The formation began to flicker, and terrifying energy ripples rammed into the surrounding walls, producing pattering sounds. The sword chi became locked in a stalemate with the formation in midair. The energy of both the formation and the sword chi quickly began to leak away, but it failed to break through the formation before completely dispersing. The defensive formation also darkened after it blocked the battle skill equivalent to a Saint King's attack. Then, its lines and images began to blur. Some lines had even been severed. When the giant sword chi vanished, a wave of faint spatial ripples collided viciously against the formation of the white tiger as well. At the same time, one of the 6 revolving fists fell from above the white tiger, as it directly targeted the white tiger's head. Roar! The white tiger shook its head and directly tossed the scepter in its mouth in Yu Yu's direction. Afterward, it produced an earth-shaking roar at the sky. A visible sound wave emerged from its mouth and spread upward to meet with the 6 fists. The defensive formation in front of the white tiger was no longer as powerful as before. After the second Saint Tier battle skill struck it, it only lasted for a short while before shattering lowly. The odd ripples surged toward the huge white tiger like a wave of water, passing through the white tiger's body. The white tiger trembled slightly and a faint, bloody mark had already appeared below its neck. Bright blood immediately began to pour from its body, dyeing its white fur red. Terrifying energy ripples began to spread from above, as the white tiger's roar destroyed the first fist of the 6. However, the second and third fist began to fall closely after one another soon afterward. They separately targeted the white tiger's head and back. Both of them moved extremely quickly. The wings on the tiger's back rose up high, as they blocked the fist that targeted its back. Its front paws clawed in a flurry, as it forcefully received the punch that targeted its head. With a boom, the 2 punches smashed the white tiger to the ground. The attack had injured its wings, as the snow-white feathers became red. Even its front paws became bloody. Even as the winged tiger god with extremely great battle prowess, the white tiger struggled to remain unscathed when it faced 3 Saint Tier battle skills at the same time. After all, it had not reached the peak of Class 7 yet. Looking at the scepter that flew over, a gleam of light flashed through Xia Wang's eyes. He had always remained by Yu Yu's side, as he protected her. He immediately leaped up to catch the scepter, before returning to Yu Yu's side. He first examined it curiously, before extending his hand to give it to Yu Yu without any hesitation. Currently, Yu Yu had focused all her attention on the white tiger. She did not even glance at the scepter that had attracted countless people. She began to worry even more after she saw that the saint rulers had injured the white tiger injured. She called out anxiously, "Xiao Bai is injured. Artifact spirit, quickly go save Xiao Bai. Don't worry, mistress. The winged tiger god won't be in much danger. It has experienced far too little battles as it grew up as well, so this is a rare opportunity for it." The artifact spirit's voice appeared in Yu Yu's head. "Someone has taken the scepter." A person cried out. Everyone immediately moved their attention from the white tiger to Xia Wang, who now held the scepter. They no longer bothered to watch the fascinating battle going on with the white tiger anymore. Instead, they all charged at Xia Wang. Xia Wang's expression drastically changed. Although he was a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler, he was nowhere near as strong as the winged tiger god. How could he handle so many opponents, especially when there were quite a few people who were also at the 9th heavenly layer like him? The last 3 giant fists also switched their targets. They no longer attacked the white tiger, now smashing threateningly towards Xia Wang's group. "Grab the scepter and enter the artifact space." Xia Wang called out in a panic. Yu Yu also understood the situation now. She immediately took the scepter from Xia Wang's hands and wanted to hide in the artifact space. However, she waited for quite a long time, but she remained where she was. Liwei, who was beside her, had instead disappeared. She had already entered the artifact space. "Oh no, mistress. If you're holding that scepter, you can't enter the space." "The scepter is resisting," the artifact spirit said sternly in Yu Yu's head. But at this moment, the 3 remaining fists had already approached Yu Yu and Xia Wang. One of them smashed towards Xia Wang, while the other 2 completely locked onto Yu Yu who held the scepter. Chapter 1050, Fairy Hao Yu's Sudden Appearance. 1. As the fists from the Saint-Tier battle skills switched targets, the pressure from the surroundings also collapsed viciously on Xia Wang and Yu Yu's bodies. Xia Wang became extremely stern. It was a Saint-Tier battle skill after all, and every fist would be at the level of Saint King's. It would be extremely difficult for him to block them with his strength at the 9th heavenly layer. Arg! Xia Wang roared at the sky. Churning blue light wildly flooded out of his body, before condensing on his finger and shooting toward the fists. A thumb-sized force shot through space as it radiated with blue light, shooting toward the fists with an aura of destruction. This was a powerful attack that Xia Wang had comprehended from the cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor. Although it was not on the level of Saint-Tier battle skills, it was as powerful as a pseudo-Saint-Tier battle skill. Locked on by two fists, the pressure Yu Yu experienced was even greater. She could not withstand it at all with her strength that was below Earth's Saint Master, so she immediately paled. Traces of blood began to pour from her mouth. Before the attack had even struck her, just the mere pressure was terrifying enough to injure her. With a loud boom, Xia Wang's attack landed on the fist that flew toward him. The attack was not on the level of Saint-Tier battle skills, so it dispersed as soon as they came in contact. The fist continued on towards Xia Wang without any reduction in speed, though its force had decreased by quite a bit. Bang! The weakened fist viciously struck Xia Wang's body. He was thrown back like a sandbag as blood sprayed wildly from his mouth. A dazzling golden light appeared above Yu Yu's head. The saint artifact that always floated above her suddenly expanded, becoming a 30-meter-tall golden tower, which blocked the area in front of her in a short moment. It helped Yu Yu resist the attacks. Boom! Boom! Both of the fists landed on the saint artifact with two violent booms. They did not even shake the saint artifact. Its toughness was not something that could be overcome by Saint-Tier battle skills. Even though Yu Yu was protected by the Saint-Tier battle skill, it was not enough to put a stop to everyone's desire for the scepter. Several dozen saint rulers had already began to threateningly charge toward her from all directions. On any other day, they probably would not dare to harm Yu Yu due to their fear of Jian Chen, but before the great enticement present, many of them had already forgotten about living and dying. Mistress, quickly throw the scepter away and enter the artifact space. That's the only way I can ensure that you stay completely safe, the artifact spirit's voice rang through Yu Yu's head. Although the artifact spirit was a saint emperor in the artifact space, it was innately restricted, so its abilities were greatly limited. The power it could use outside was extremely weak, so protecting her outside from enemies coming in all directions was extremely difficult. Yu Yu looked at the scepter hesitantly as a sliver of unwillingness appeared in her eyes. She did not covet the scepter, it was just that the way to save Jian Chen might lie with the scepter. Mistress, give up on the scepter first and enter the artifact space. Don't worry about the divine hull. Rui Jin still has his most powerful card up his sleeve, the artifact spirit called out anxiously. With that, Yu Yu finally made up her mind. She grit her teeth and began swinging her hand. She was about to throw away the scepter. If you throw away the moon god's scepter, you will never be able to save the person you want to save. Consider it. At this moment, a woman's pleasant voice rang through Yu Yu's head. The sudden appearance of the voice surprised Yu Yu, which caused her to immediately tighten her grasp on the scepter. She clutched it tightly and looked around in surprise, as if she wanting to find who the speaker was. You have not thrown away the moon god's scepter. You have made a choice. Don't worry, you'll be fine. The same voice rang in Yu Yu's head. It was extremely obscure, and only Yu Yu could hear it. However, she could not tell where it came from. Suddenly, the scepter in Yu Yu's hand exploded with bright light. An extremely terrifying energy erupted from the scepter, sweeping into the surroundings in the form of a storm. It flung all the saint rulers that charged toward her afar, even the saint artifact floating above her head was unable to avoid it. It too was knocked far away by the powerful force. The energy from the scepter did not distinguish between enemies and friends. Other than Yu Yu, everyone, including the white tiger, Xia Wang, and the saint artifact, were flung far away. In the blink of an eye, everyone had disappeared within a radius of several hundred meters from Yu Yu. She seemed like the only one present as bright moonlight surrounded her. Yu Yu watched everything unfold in a dumbstruck fashion. She just struggled to believe that such a powerful energy had erupted from the very peaceful scepter. It filled her with disbelief. Before she could return to her senses, she suddenly felt her body tighten up. She had been surrounded by a mysterious force and brought into the air. She quickly flew toward the throne at the very back of the hall. Quick, stop her. Once she obtains the divine hall, we will have no more chances left, a saint ruler cried out in a panic after being knocked far away. Afterward, he immediately climbed up, shooting after Yu Yu as fast as he could. He wanted to stop Yu Yu from approaching the throne. All the other saint rulers paid no heed to their injured either. All of them wanted to take the divine hall for themselves, so none of them wanted to allow Yu Yu to take what they drooled over. They all took part in encircling and stopping Yu Yu. A terrifying ripple of residual energy spread out and all the saint rulers struck out as hard as they could. Various powerful attacks flew in from all directions, all targeting Yu Yu. Yu Yu had been completely coated in dense moonlight by the scepter. When the saint rulers' attacks landed on that layer of light, they all collapsed by themselves, unable to harm Yu Yu since she was surrounded by moonlight. Under the protection of the moonlight, Yu Yu arrived near the throne without any obstruction despite being targeted by so many densely packed attacks. Afterward, she just landed on top of it with the scepter in hand. As soon as she sat down, the space surrounding the throne began to violently twist. Everything blurred, obscuring everyone's vision. When it returned back to normal, Yu Yu had already disappeared from the throne. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.